This poor woman has always wanted to marry a wealthy young man to change her fate. However, she doesn't realize that the man who has been pursuing her is the son of a wealthy family. Instead, she mistakenly believes that another man is the wealthy young man she desires. As a result, she ignores the true wealthy young man and decides to marry the fake wealthy young man. This woman, who spends her days daydreaming, is named Sionmi. Due to her parents' circumstances, she has been living under the same roof as Hayami and has become her best friend. Sionmi's father passed away when she was very young, leaving her with a mountain of debt. Her mother also became a vegetable, and all the expenses fell on her shoulders. Because of this immense pressure, Sionmi has always hoped to marry a wealthy man. This way, she could send her mother to a better nursing home for treatment. But she never imagined that the only son of the company president would hide his identity and pursue her fiercely. She thought he was just a poor boy and didn't want to date him. But one day, Jungkyu did Sionmi a big favor, so she agreed to go on a date with him. Sionmi didn't want to waste her time on a useless person, so she asked her best friend to go on the date with Jungkyu for her. Sionmi didn't know that Jungkyu had prepared a diamond necklace for the date, but she gave up this chance to turn her life around and handed it over to her best friend. When Jungkyu saw that it was Sionmi's best friend, he immediately put the necklace away. Actually, Hayami had already secretly fallen for Jungkyu. This time, she could also thank Sionmi for her luck. Since things had already come to this point, Jungkyu did not cancel the date. As the two spent time together, Jungkyu gradually fell in love with the kind Hayami. Perhaps this was fate. However, this was only the beginning of Hayami's nightmare. After returning home from the date, Jungkyu sent Sionmi an angry text message, thanking her for introducing him to such a wonderful woman. Sionmi was relieved when she saw the text message. However, she would soon regret her foolish behavior. On that day, Jungkyu was very dissatisfied with his father for always looking down on him. This made Jungkyu, who had been working hard, hate his father even more. At his father's press conference, Jungkyu came to the scene and asked his father a question. Your success would not have been possible without the help of your family. Then, how are your family relationships? And what kind of father are you to your children? President Lee paused for a moment before revealing Jungkyu's true identity to everyone present. This was somewhat unexpected for Jungkyu, who hadn't anticipated his father would reveal it in such a public setting. Meanwhile, Hayami was furious that Jungkyu had hidden his wealthy background and stormed off. Jungkyu ignored Sionmi and immediately chased after Hayami, who had already left. At that moment, Sionmi was extremely disappointed. She had once dreamed of being so close to him, but she had given him up with her own hands. However, Sionmi did not give up. She went straight to Jungkyu. She blamed Jungkyu for not telling her the truth earlier. Hayami is a kind girl. Please don't hurt her. Jungkyu warned Sionmi not to use Hayami as an excuse. You might as well just say that you want to get back together with me. Sionmi didn't deny what he said. Jungkyu was about to send a text message to Hayami to meet and explain, but he suddenly remembered what Sionmi had just said about starting over. Sionmi, desperate to win Jungkyu's love back, began to resort to any means necessary. She deliberately said many bad things about Jungkyu in front of Hayami. Hayami, hearing these words, was both heartbroken and sad. President Lee really appreciates Sionmi's work and wants to set her up with his son. This makes Sionmi extremely happy. Jungkyu is disgusted by Sionmi's behavior. On the way back, Jungkyu angrily asks her if she's only with him because of his status. Sionmi directly says that she's just following the president's orders. She doesn't care about her reputation as long as she can marry into a wealthy family. Just as they were about to get out of the car, Sionmi suddenly saw Hayami hiding in the corner. Staring at them, the scheming Sionmi turned around and said to Jungkyu, "Goodbye." Jungkyu wanted to slap her across the face, but from afar, Hayami saw the intimate and ambiguous scene. This completely shattered Hayami's feelings for Jungkyu. The next day, Sionmi wanted to ask Jungkyu out to strengthen their relationship. Unexpectedly, she accidentally saw the man who had been pursuing her. He came out of a luxurious villa. She hurriedly hid on the side and watched everything from afar. After they left, Sionmi came to the villa and was shocked. She didn't expect that the men who were pursuing her were all hidden millionaires. She immediately called Jungkyu and told him not to bother her anymore. Sionmi now frequently writes love letters to Jaeho, who is still serving in the military. Whenever Jaeho is on leave, she accompanies him and plays together. To prevent Hayami from continuing her relationship with Jungkyu, Sionmi resorts to moral blackmail in front of Hayami. She tells Hayami that Jungkyu loves her and hopes Hayami will stop interfering in her relationship with Jungkyu. After saying this, Sionmi started crying tearfully. That night, Jungkyu, who was slightly drunk, wanted to find Hyami to explain the misunderstanding. He happened to see Seonmi and Jaeho parting reluctantly. This made Junkyu extremely angry. He never thought Seonmi was such a cunning and treacherous woman. In order to expose Seonmi's hypocritical lies, Junkyu asked her to marry him. Seonmi was a little surprised, but she refused on the grounds that they were not officially dating. Junkyu no longer hid the fact that she had a boyfriend. He scolded her for deceiving his father behind his back. At this moment, Seonmi fought back with righteous indignation. She said that she had never lightly agreed to date Junkyu. She even said that her current boyfriend was someone Junkyu could never compare to. Seonmi finally made her choice and decided to give up Junkyu and pursue Jaeho. However, she didn't want to give Junkyu to Hyami just because she was leaving, so she told Junkyu not to toy with the kind Hyami. Junkyu never imagined someone could be so shameless. If he was so afraid Hyami would get hurt, he shouldn't have let her go on a date with me in the first place. Seeing everything clearly, Junkyu began to pursue Hyami fiercely, but Hyami, unaware of the truth, refused to acknowledge Junkyu. Junkyu realized that Seonmi must be behind this, so Junkyu tricked both Seonmi and Hyami into coming out together. He wanted to propose to Hyami in front of Seonmi. He asked Hyami to sit down, look only at him, and listen only to him, but Hyami kept looking at Seonmi out of consideration for her. Junkyu asked Hyami to be honest and look only into her heart. He hoped that Hyami would not be influenced by anyone and choose the answer in her heart. But the kind Hyami had grown up with Seonmi after all. She didn't want to hurt Seonmi's feelings, so she reluctantly rejected Junkyu's proposal. When she left, Hyami apologized to Seonmi and said that she didn't know that something like this would happen today. However, Junkyu didn't give up. He had a big fight with his father over Hyami, packed his bags, and prepared to run away from home. Junkyu took his bags and went straight to Hyami's house. He immediately paid a deep bow to Hyami's mother. Seonmi, seeing this, was so angry that she left immediately. Hyami had no choice but to call Junkyu outside. Junkyu didn't waste any words and confessed his love once again. He said he couldn't give up on Hyami because he had never won against his father in his entire life. Hyami wanted to leave, but Junkyu held her tightly in his arms and promised to love her forever. Junkyu's outburst gave Seonmi the excuse she needed to move out. Seonmi deliberately acted as if she had been wronged in this family. She then took her packed luggage and left without heeding Hyami's mother's desperate pleas to stay. Seonmi wanted to make Hyami and her mother feel deeply guilty. This was because, years ago, Seonmi's father had saved both his wife and Hyami's mother when they were drowning at the same time. However, Seonmi's father saved Hyami's mother on the shore first and then went back to save his wife. As a result, Seonmi's mother drowned and was in a vegetative state. This is why Hyami's mother has been kinder to Seonmi than her own daughter over the years. But this time, Hyami wanted her mother to take her side. She told her mother that she really loved Junkyu. Seonmi quickly started living with Jaeho without any shame. That day, Hyami helped her mother bring Seonmi's bedding to the rental house. Just as she was about to enter, she heard a man's voice coming from inside the house. This shocked her beyond belief. Seonmi had just finished shopping and saw Hyami outside. Panicked, she told Hyami not to make a sound and leave immediately. At that moment, Hyami finally realized that she had been toyed with by Seonmi. In order to spare her feelings, she was even willing to give up her own happiness. Now she had a boyfriend, but she came to pretend to be pitiful and asked Hyami not to be with Junkyu. Hyami went to Junkyu and said directly, "I'm willing to marry you." The biggest obstacle for the two of them to be together was their parents. Fortunately, Junkyu's mother loved her son very much. She told her husband that if he didn't agree to let Junkyu marry Hyami, she would divorce him. President Lee had no choice but to agree. Since Hyami's mother had always thought that Seonmi liked Junkyu, she felt guilty towards Seonmi. Therefore, she didn't want her daughter to do anything to hurt Seonmi. Hyami found her mother alone and didn't tell her that Seonmi was already living with her boyfriend. She just told her mother not to feel too guilty about it. Seonmi would definitely find her own happiness. At this point, her mother could only agree and wish her daughter happiness. At this time, Seonmi began to pursue Jaeho fiercely. She didn't want to end up without a rich boyfriend. So, on her initiative, the two spent a wonderful night together. Since Jaeho still had a few years left in the military before he could be discharged, he planned to end his leave and return to the army. However, the house he was staying in was not a luxurious villa. His mother was not a wealthy matriarch but a maid in the Junkyu family. The next day, as soon as Seonmi arrived at the company, she heard from her colleagues that Junkyu and Hayami were getting married. She was very unhappy that Hayami was marrying into a wealthy family before her. This made her even more worried that she would lose Jaeho. So she wrote letters to the army every day to express her love for Jaeho. Jaeho did not disappoint Seonmi and promised that they would get married after he was discharged from the army. Hayami's mother worked hard to raise her 3 children on her own. At this point, she was very grateful to Junkyu's parents for agreeing to Hayami and Junkyu's marriage. She also thanked them for understanding her family's poverty and not buying any wedding items. Junkyu and Hayami's wedding was held on a rainy day. With the blessings of both sides of the family, Junkyu and Hayami became a truly loving couple. Seonmi also came to the wedding. However, she believed that this was the happiness she was bestowing upon Hayami. What was even more despicable was that she dared to sneak into the bridal chamber alone. At that moment, a maid entered and discovered Seonmi's presence. She immediately scolded Seonmi for her lack of manners. Seonmi, however, did not realize that the maid was Jaeho's mother. A month later, Hayami successfully became pregnant with Junkyu's child. To reward Hayami, Junkyu secretly gave his younger brother a shop without telling his father. At the same time, Seonmi also found out that she was pregnant with Jaeho's child. This finally put her mind at ease. She believed that as long as she had the child in her womb, she could easily marry into a wealthy family. That day, Hayami suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and felt like she was about to give birth. Junkyu was so excited he didn't know what to do. Seonmi also told Jaeho that she was about to give birth. Jaeho was very excited and told Seonmi to hurry up and find his mother for help. This made Seonmi happy, thinking that she would finally be able to live in a mansion. When she arrived at the luxurious villa, the chaebol's wife told her that she had come to the wrong place. Jaeho was just a tutor in her family. The wealthy woman had the driver write down Jaeho's real address and gave it to Seonmi. Seonmi couldn't believe any of this was real, but she still followed the address on the note. When she saw her boyfriend's house, she completely broke down, devastated. Seonmi was in excruciating pain. As she stumbled toward the hospital, she encountered the man who had been chasing her for money. Feeling desperate, Seonmi sat down on the ground and cried loudly in pain. Fortunately, the man who had been chasing her for money had developed feelings for Seonmi over the years. He rushed Seonmi to the hospital and registered her as a guardian. Coincidentally, Hayami was also giving birth at the same hospital. However, Seonmi encountered difficulties during natural childbirth and had to undergo surgery. But Seonmi was afraid of scarring and refused to undergo the surgery. After enduring endless pain, she successfully gave birth to a daughter. At the same time, Hayami experienced a minor complication during childbirth. Hayami's cervix was punctured during childbirth, requiring another 3-hour surgery. The baby also developed bubbles in the head. However, the doctor said the baby had strong recovery abilities and should not suffer any long-term effects. At this moment, the attitudes of the mother-in-law and the biological mother are revealed. Hayami's mother has been worried about her daughter's life. The mother-in-law, on the other hand, has been worried about her granddaughter's current condition. Seonmi wants to die at this moment. When she sees Jaeho's call, she turns off her phone and throws it in the trash. She doesn't want to see Jaeho, whom she once mistook for a rich man, ever again. Seonmi was about to go see her child when she accidentally saw Junkyu. It was then that she realized that she and Hayami had given birth at the same hospital at the same time. Seonmi then found her child in Junkyu's child. Now miserable, she hated Hayami, who was enjoying a happy life. With all her heart, she believed that everything Hayami now had should have been hers. As a mother, she didn't want her child to live a life of poverty like hers. At that moment, the 2 nurses in the room happened to leave. A terrifying and cruel thought instantly appeared in Seonmi's mind. A moment later, Seonmi returned to her hospital room in a panic. She asked her friends to help her bring the child back so she could complete the discharge procedures. Just like that, Seonmi left the hospital with the child in a state of panic. Soon after, Junkyu's mother also came to take the child back home. She couldn't take her eyes off her granddaughter. Jaeho's mother was also beaming with joy at the sight of the little girl. She didn't know that this little girl was her own granddaughter. In order to continue her dream of becoming part of a wealthy family, Seonmi left the child at Jaeho's doorstep. She left a note explaining that the child was Jaeho's biological daughter. After doing all this, Seonmi felt extremely distressed. She never imagined that she would end up in such a miserable situation. She had done something that would make both humans and gods angry for the sake of her own daughter's future happiness. When Hayami saw the child for the first time after leaving the hospital, she was puzzled. Didn't the doctor say that the child would have a bump on her head? Her mother-in-law explained that it was probably just the child's delicate skin and that it would heal quickly. At that time, no one realized that the children had been switched. Soon after, Jae-ho finished his military service and returned home. He didn't know what had happened to Seonmi, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't get in touch with Seonmi, who had completely disappeared. Jae-ho went to the place where Seonmi had been renting, but found nothing. He felt as if Seonmi had suddenly vanished from the face of the earth. At this moment, Seonmi was recovering from childbirth. She was completely transforming herself in preparation for competing for the identity of a wealthy daughter-in-law. Seonmi began to study furniture design relentlessly. Fully prepared, she returned to the company to meet with the president. Seonmi lied that she had been studying abroad for the past year and had just returned to the country. She handed the president the proposal she had carefully prepared. President Lee decided to reinstate Seonmi to her original position and give her another chance. Meanwhile, Hyami was not very happy since marrying into a wealthy family. One day, she accidentally discovered a necklace engraved with Seonmi's initials. This left Hyami feeling a mix of emotions. She realized that this was the gift Junkyu had intended to give Seonmi. She confronted Junkyu, asking why he hadn't disposed of such an item before their marriage. Junkyu angrily told Hyami to handle it herself. Despite her pain, Hyami returned the necklace to its original place. Junkyu's family disliked her for coming from a poor family. Kind-hearted Hyami saw this and felt pain in her heart, but she could only suppress all her grievances. Only when she looked at her daughter could Hyami forget all her troubles and live on with strength. After countless efforts to find Seonmi, Jae-ho received the news of her death. This made Jae-ho feel unbearable pain and blame himself. He took Seonmi's painting to the beach and held a simple funeral for her. Jae-ho swore in his grief that he would end his life and join her once he had raised his daughter. Just as he was leaving, Seonmi seemed to sense something and came to the same place. But in her heart, Seonmi never thought she had done anything wrong to Jae-ho. She hoped that Jae-ho would forget her and find happiness. Seonmi wanted to live a life of luxury, so she had to get rid of Hyami. After returning to the company, she began creating opportunities to work with Junkyu. When she found out that Junkyu had opened a furniture store for Hyami's younger brother, she was filled with jealousy, but she quickly found a new opening. Seonmi deliberately told the department manager about Hyami's younger brother opening an unauthorized store. President Lee was extremely dissatisfied with his son's decision to help Hyami's younger brother open a store. He was very worried about how his foolish son would inherit the company in the future. Seonmi understood the president's concerns and suggested that she and Junkyu start a new project together. She would guide Junkyu to grow and achieve something. Then, when Junkyu inherited the company in the future, no one would oppose it. President Lee appreciated Seonmi's ability and agreed to train Junkyu according to her plan. Seonmi then found Junkyu and told him that if he wanted to gain his father's approval and successfully take over the company, he had to do something to prove himself. Junkyu understood his own abilities and felt discouraged. Seonmi told Junkyu about the plan she had just discussed with the president. She promised that she would help Junkyu grow quickly. Junkyu was very moved and immediately grabbed Seonmi's hand to thank her. In order to celebrate their cooperation, the two go to a restaurant. Junkyu tells Seonmi that he is worried about what he will do without her help in the future. Seonmi wants to say, "Then marry me," but she knows it's too early and can only say that she will always be by his side. Junkyu suddenly sees that his wife is calling. He glances at Seonmi and hangs up the phone. Unexpectedly, Hyami called Seonmi again. Seonmi quietly went to the restroom to answer Hyami's call. She told Hyami without hiding anything that Junkyu was drinking with her. This made Hyami feel very uncomfortable at home. In order to speed up her plan, she deliberately created a scandal between herself and Junkyu at the company. The upright President Lee would never allow such a thing to happen to his son and tarnish the family name. So he asked Seonmi to find a way to quell the scandal between her and Junkyu. Everything was within Seonmi's expectations. Seonmi pretended to be wronged and said that she had no choice but to withdraw from the project with Junkyu. However, she secretly continues to do everything she can to help Junkyu become an excellent successor. She then tells Junkyu about her decision. Seonmi hints to Junkyu that she is doing this at the president's request. Junkyu is very angry, feeling that his success is inseparable from Seonmi's help. He also feels that Seonmi has put a lot of effort into the current project plan. He doesn't want Seonmi to keep helping him behind his back. So Junkyu went straight to his father and assured him that there was nothing going on between him and Seonmi. Junkyu said he didn't care about the rumors and was determined to complete the project with Seonmi. This was exactly what Seonmi wanted to achieve, making Junkyu feel like he couldn't do anything without her. Seonmi took this opportunity to stop hiding her ambitions. Junkyu was afraid that Seonmi would leave and hoped that she wouldn't worry about the rumors. Seonmi said that she was afraid that even her love for him would be discovered. Junkyu finally understood Seonmi's love for him. Seonmi pretended to be pitiful and said that it was too late now. Moved Junkyu held Seonmi tightly in his arms. Hyami saw the whole scene. Hyami was furious and went up to Seonmi to ask her what was going on. Seonmi didn't defend herself. Hyami was heartbroken and left alone with tears in her eyes. Seonmi told Junkyu directly that she didn't want the company employees to look at her differently. She said she would come back to work when he sorted out his feelings. Junkyu understood Seonmi's meaning. Seonmi then told Hyami's mother that she wanted to cut off all ties with her. Hyami's mother, unaware of the truth, desperately tried to stop her. However, Hyami knew why Seonmi was doing this and urged her mother to accept reality and give up on Seonmi. This was too much for Hyami's mother to handle. Seonmi waited outside for Hyami to come out and no longer held back, declaring war. She told Hyami that it would be best for her to withdraw from the fight. Hyami was heartbroken that her best friend, who had grown up with her, would do such a thing, but for the sake of her child and her family, she was determined not to give up and protect her current family. However, Junkyu had never given up on his feelings for Seonmi. He knelt on the ground and begged Hyami to let him go. Hyami thought that she wasn't good enough. He said that he would change himself and that he would never leave her and their daughter. But at this point, Junkyu's heart was already set, and he was unmoved by Hyami's words. Seonmi didn't give Junkyu a chance to catch his breath and forced him to formally introduce himself to the president. She told Junkyu not to be afraid, that even if he lost, she would always be by his side. Wanting to save her family, Hyami found her father-in-law and asked him to help. President Lee said he had an appointment with Junkyu and asked her to come along. This dinner was actually Junkyu's way of formally introducing Seonmi to his father. President Lee was furious and found it absurd, so he tried to leave by crossing the table. Seonmi happened to come in at that moment and blocked his way. Junkyu immediately said that Seonmi was the woman he wanted to introduce. Just as President Lee was at a loss, Hyami arrived with the child in her arms. President Lee stood on the moral high ground, thinking of Hyami. He was extremely angry at his son's shameless behavior, but Hyami was once again deeply hurt. Seonmi didn't want Junkyu and the president to sever their father-son relationship. What she wanted was the status of a wealthy family's daughter-in-law. Back at the company, Seonmi immediately suggested going straight to Junkyu's house now. She assured Junkyu not to worry about raising the child after losing his mother. Seonmi directly promised to take good care of and raise his daughter. Junkyu's daughter was her own flesh and blood. She would definitely love her. However, Junkyu dared not challenge his father's authority at this moment. Seonmi was desperate to marry into a wealthy family out of necessity, although Jaeho had heard that Seonmi had died during childbirth. After investigating, he found evidence suggesting that she was still alive. Therefore, Jaeho continued to invest significant effort in searching for Seonmi's whereabouts. Seonmi feared that if Jaeho found her, it would ruin her dream of marrying into a wealthy family. She must become a true member of the wealthy family before Jaeho finds her. Therefore, she has been sending people to monitor Jaeho's movements, to force Hyami to agree to a divorce and quickly marry into the wealthy family. Seonmi plans to use Hyami's younger brother to her advantage. Youngho falls into the trap set by Seonmi. The people who came to buy furniture from him and the suppliers were all arranged by Seonmi. In the end, all the furniture Youngho sold turned out to be counterfeit and substandard products. After being exposed, Youngho realized the situation was dire and went into hiding. The company's brands suffered a massive blow, and Junkyu was harshly scolded by his father. However, Seonmi, who had already prepared a countermeasure, quickly came up with a plan to resolve the matter. This finally improved President Lee's opinion of Seonmi slightly. He believed Seonmi was indeed a woman of great capability, but Seonmi's real goal was to use this as a condition for Junkyu to get Hyami to sign the divorce agreement. Otherwise, Youngho would likely be sued by the company's board of directors. Hyami was completely disappointed in Junkyu's actions. That day, she decided to take her daughter back to her parents' home. However, her mother-in-law, who only had her son's best interests at heart, stopped Hyami. Hyami said she could leave, but she had to leave her child behind. The child was the only reason Hyami had to go on living in her current miserable situation. Hyami, who was stopped, could only helplessly call her mother for help. Her mother, who felt sorry for her daughter, immediately rushed over without hesitation. At that moment, Seonmi was still urging Junkyu to take her home, but Junkyu was still arguing with his father and refused to go back. Seonmi didn't care and went to the mansion alone. She planned to team up with Junkyu's mother to drive Hyami away. At that moment, Hyami came downstairs and saw Seonmi, her heart filled with hatred. Then Hyami's mother also rushed over. She believed that Junkyu was in the wrong for taking the child from Hyami. She spoke kindly, hoping that Junkyu's mother wouldn't do something that would bring shame upon herself. Junkyu did something wrong, and as his mother, shouldn't you guide him on the right path? Junkya's mother directly said that as long as her son is happy, she will support him. Hayame's mother was speechless upon hearing this. Since it had come to this, there was no need for her to humiliate herself any further. She sternly ordered Hayame to take the child and go home with her. At that moment, she thought Seonmi had come to help Hayame. Seonmi brushed off her foster mother's hand and said without hesitation, "The woman Junkyu loves is me." This left Hayame's mother speechless. As if struck by lightning, she angrily scolded Junkyu for doing something so hurtful to Hayame. If it had been another woman, maybe Hayame would have felt a little better, but that was Hayame's childhood best friend. This was not something a human being could do. Junkyu knew he had made a terrible mistake and didn't dare breathe. Out of guilt, he said he would take the child back himself next time. At this moment, Seonmi had not left Junkyu's house. Instead, she secretly ran to Junkyu's room and lovingly held the child in her arms. This was the first time she had held her own daughter. At that moment, Junkyu returned and saw the scene, but didn't think much of it. He wanted to take the child from Seonmi's arms and give her to Hayame. This made Seonmi very excited. Coming to this family, she not only had to become the wife of a wealthy man, but also had to raise her own daughter. She would never allow Junkyu to take the child away. Seonmi threatened him that if he took the child away, she would not marry him. Junkyu was torn but had no choice but to temporarily give in. When Hayame couldn't find her daughter, she confronted Junkyu, demanding an explanation. Junkyu used the excuse that Hayame wasn't capable of providing for the child's future. Hayame was furious. She never imagined Junkyu could be such a dishonest and shameless man. Just then, Junkyu received a phone call. This left Hayame feeling utterly despairing. On the phone, Junkyu's mother said she had decided to hire a lawyer to fight for custody of the child. If that happened, Hayame would likely lose her daughter. Hayame put aside her past grievances and begged Seonmi to help her get her daughter back. She believed that Seonmi's goal was to make Junkyu give up the child. However, Hayame did not know that the child was Seonmi's biological daughter, but Seonmi would never reveal the truth. So she used the fact that she had recognized Hayame's younger brother as a threat. If your daughter grows up in a family like yours, she will be ruined. Fortunately, Junkyu still had a little conscience at that time. He didn't want Hayame to suffer such a huge blow, so he secretly took the child away. Hayame returned home with the child and smiled for the first time in a long time. She no longer cared what would happen to Junkyu and Seonmi in the end. She only wanted her daughter to be by her side, which was her greatest happiness. But Hayame was still too naive. Junkyu's parents wouldn't just hand over their granddaughter to Hayame to raise. Immediately, Seonmi brought Junkyu's mother to Hayame's place and forced them to hand over the child. Hayame desperately tried to stop Seonmi, but she told her to be reasonable. Junkyu's mother even said that if they didn't let her take the child, she would sue Hayame's brother. This plunges Hayame into endless despair, so she can only watch as she sends away the daughter she considers her own flesh and blood. At this moment, there are no words to express the pain and helplessness of a mother who has lost her child. Only heart-wrenching cries can express the extreme pain in Hayame's heart. Her mother is also powerless to help, and it pains her to see this, but she will not lose her dignity. Hayame's mother returned the house and some money that Junkyu had given them. Before leaving, she slapped Junkyu hard across the face. Although the situation had reached this desperate point, Hayame swore that no matter how difficult it was, she would do whatever it took to bring her daughter back. Seonmi finally got her wish and married Junkyu. Hayame also attended the wedding. Seeing her daughter in someone else's arms, she was in tears. She didn't know that her daughter was suffering in another place without her mother's care. Time passed quickly, and 6 years went by. One day, Hayame was getting off the elevator at the mall when she saw a child the same age as her daughter. This moment reminded her of her own daughter. Just as she was lost in her memories, she didn't notice that she had fallen into the arms of the man in front of her. That man was Jaeho, the man who raised her daughter. This encounter was destined to tie the fates of the two men together. That day, Hayame was surprised when she saw the chairman's speech on stage. She didn't expect that the job she had worked so hard to find was at her father-in-law's branch office. What's more, her ex-husband, who had abandoned her, was her direct superior. Junkyu and Jaeho were responsible for the management and operation of this newly established branch office. Hayame becoming an employee of the company came as a surprise to President Lee. He ordered Junkyu to fire Hayame from the company as soon as possible. If Hayame stayed here, it would inevitably lead to more complications and disrupt their current lives. Junkyu understood this logic and approached Hayame privately. He hoped that Hayame would leave the company voluntarily before anyone else got hurt. However, Junkyu's selfish actions angered Hayame greatly. Hayame immediately said that she would not leave the company. She told Junkyu that no matter where they met in the future, they should pretend that they did not know each other. When Hayame came out, Jae-ho happened to be there. At that time, they were not very familiar with each other, so they just greeted each other briefly. Over the years, Jae-ho had worked hard and relied on his talent to gain President Lee's trust. This art gallery was founded by Jae-ho himself. Although Jungkyu is now the company's boss, the real power lies in Jae-ho's hands. Jae-ho was puzzled to learn that Jungkyu wanted to fire an outstanding employee for no reason. All the company's employees were personally recruited and selected by him. When he saw Hayami applying for the job, he immediately recognized her as the woman he had saved in the elevator. Upon hearing Hayami's understanding of the company's products and her philosophy on customer service, he immediately formed a strong impression of her. However, Jungkyu did not provide any reason for wanting to fire Hayami. Jae-ho angrily refused Jungkyu's request on the spot. Due to the events at the company during the day, Hayami sat in the park feeling depressed at night. This scene was coincidentally witnessed by Jae-ho, who happened to be passing by. It turned out that Jae-ho had recently moved to the same neighborhood as Hayami, making them neighbors. Their relationship would gradually develop under these serendipitous circumstances. The next day, Jungkyu called Hayami into his office again and begged her to leave the company. Hayami remained unmoved. Unbeknownst to them, Seonmi happened to witness the scene. Seonmi was terrified. She couldn't understand why Hayami was there. She decided to have a serious talk with Hayami. Jae-ho came out of the office just as Seonmi was passing by. At this moment, Seonmi was terrified. She thought that Hayami was deliberately getting close to Jungkyu to get revenge on her. She begged Hayami to forget the past and find a job somewhere else. Hayami didn't want to have much contact with her heartless best friend. She said that she would never leave and then turned around and walked away. Seonmi was furious and became even more convinced that Hayami was taking revenge on her. She would never let her own daughter return to Hayami. She had to do everything in her power to get Hayami out of the company. Seonmi found a good friend she used to work with. This friend was clearly not a good person. Seonmi asked her friend to get a job at the art museum to help her deal with Hayami. Although Hayami didn't want to have anything to do with Jungkyu and Seonmi, she was determined not to leave the company because it gave her a chance to see her daughter. Knowing this, her mother could only feel sorry for Hayami. Hayami missed her daughter every moment of every day. The little girl on the bus was her real daughter. Lucy fell asleep and was left behind on the bus by her grandmother. Hayami found her and took her to the police station. At that moment, Jae-ho's mother, who was on her way home, realized that her granddaughter was missing. Upon receiving the news at the company, Jae-ho became extremely anxious. No matter where he searched, he found nothing. Fortunately, just as he was about to give up hope, he finally received a call from the police station. Upon seeing his daughter safe and sound, Jae-ho finally relaxed. Perhaps it was an instinctive connection between blood relatives. Lucy felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity when she saw Hayami. The relationship between Hayami and Jae-ho also underwent a subtle change at that moment. Seonmi witnessed the scene and immediately covered her mouth in shock. She never imagined that Hayami knew Jae-ho. What terrified her even more was that Hayami was with her biological daughter. Seonmi couldn't understand why Hayami knew Jae-ho. She was terrified that her scheme of switching the children would be exposed. If that happened, she might face the most brutal punishment. On the day of the official opening ceremony of the art museum, Seonmi arrived at the scene, but when she saw Jae-ho on stage, she was so shocked she couldn't move. She hurriedly turned around, desperate to escape as quickly as possible. Back home, Seonmi was trembling with fear. She was afraid that Jae-ho's appearance would expose everything she had been hiding. Jae-ho accidentally ran into Perrin, who had gotten separated from her family at the art gallery. He didn't know that the little girl in front of him was his real daughter. Seonmi would never allow everything she had worked so hard for to be destroyed. She knew that in order to keep her status as the wife of a wealthy family, she must get Hayami and Jae-ho out of the company. Seonmi deliberately made the man who had been chasing her for debt Jungkyu's personal driver. She lied that Taemin was her father's good friend when he was alive. Then Seonmi began to use her mother-in-law to drive Jae-ho away. Seonmi knew that Jungkyu was her mother-in-law's favorite. If someone stood in the way of Jungkyu's future, her mother-in-law would be the first to stand up for him. So Seonmi told her mother-in-law that as long as Jae-ho was at the art gallery, Jungkyu would always be nothing more than a figurehead. Although Sunja said it was impossible, she knew deep down that Seonmi was telling the truth. Seonmi had her men spread the scandal that Hayami was Jungkyu's ex-wife. Jae-ho also found out that Hayami was Jungkyu's ex-wife. However, he ordered all employees not to discuss personal matters at the company. President Lee called Seonmi to the office that day to meet Xian. Seonmi left alone again and went to the shopping mall to wait for her daughter. Hayami's cousin got into an argument with one of Seonmi's subordinates. She had discovered that it was this team leader who had maliciously spread the news that Hayami was Jungkyu's ex-wife. Upon hearing this, Jae-ho hurried to mediate the situation, but just as he was passing through a hallway, a familiar figure suddenly appeared before his eyes. Wasn't that the person he had been searching for? At that moment, Seonmi looked up and saw Jae-ho. She immediately chose to run away. Jae-ho hurriedly chased after her, but in the end, he was too late and couldn't catch up with Seonmi. He just wanted his daughter to be loved by her mother like other children. He wanted to understand what had happened to Seonmi over the years. Lucy had always envied her classmates who had mothers, but whenever Lucy asked where her mother was, Jae-ho could only bring out Seonmi's sketches to comfort his daughter. Little Lucy could only fantasize that one day her mother would appear and hug her. The sad Jae-ho confided his heartache to Hyami. However, if Jae-ho had simply said the name of the girlfriend he missed, Seonmi, he could have found her through Hyami. But Jae-ho never said the name, and out of politeness, Hyami did not ask further. That day, Jae-ho rushed to the hotel to sign a contract with an important client. Before him, Seonmi had also arrived there to meet the same client on behalf of Junkyu, who couldn't make it on time. However, they both missed the meeting with the client. Just as Jae-ho was about to leave, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around and saw Seonmi getting ready to leave, but this time, he didn't give Seonmi a chance to escape. After 6 years, Jae-ho finally saw Seonmi alive. He thanked heaven and earth deeply and hugged Seonmi tightly, expressing his feelings of longing. But Seonmi was so scared that she trembled all over and didn't dare to look Jae-ho in the eye. Seonmi pretended to look pitiful and said that she had been threatened with death by debt collectors. At that time, she had just given birth to a child, and Jae-ho was still serving in the military. In order to protect her child's safety, she had no choice but to fake her death to deceive the debt collectors. With just a few words, she moved Jae-ho to tears. Jae-ho said that since he was back, he would take responsibility for everything. He hoped that Seonmi would return to him and live with their child. At that moment, Seonmi secretly took off her wedding ring. She lied again, saying that she was about to get married. Her current fiancé was the person who had helped her survive, so she couldn't go back to Jae-ho. Seonmi hoped that Jae-ho would forget everything about her and let her go. Jae-ho truly loved Seonmi and didn't want to lose her and their child. At this moment, Seonmi didn't dare to continue entangling herself with Jae-ho. She knew that her husband was about to arrive. Seonmi snatched her cell phone from Jae-ho's hand, lied that she needed to use the restroom, and hurriedly left. Sure enough, Junkyu also arrived at this moment. However, he only saw Jae-ho. Junkyu asks Jae-ho to go with him to sign the contract with the client. But at this moment, Jae-ho only has Seonmi on his mind. He says he has something more important to do and runs away. In order to find Seonmi, Jae-ho disregards everything and runs straight to the women's restroom, searching for her one by one. Obviously, Seonmi has already taken the opportunity to escape again. With no other choice, Jae-ho and Junkyu go to the hotel and find the important client. Under Jae-ho's heartfelt explanation of the situation with his beloved girlfriend, the client was finally moved and signed the important contract. This made Junkyu marvel at how Jae-ho was such a man of passion. He didn't know that the female lead in Jae-ho's touching story was his current wife. Seonmi knew that Jae-ho's existence was always a threat. The only way to eliminate the threat was to make Jae-ho take the secret with him and leave this world forever. Although Taemin had done many dirty and shameful things, he didn't have the guts to end someone's life. He knew that if something happened, Seonmi wouldn't be able to let him get away with it. Jae-ho was invited to the president's home as a guest for securing the order. When Seonmi heard this news, it was as if the end of the world was coming. She tried everything she could to get out of the house, but her mother-in-law told her that she had to wait until after dinner before she could leave. Just then, Jae-ho and the president arrived at the house. Seonmi hid in her room, anxious. Junkyu's sister came up several times to tell her to come down and greet the guests. But no matter what excuse Seonmi used to refuse to come downstairs, Junkyu's sister insisted that she should at least go downstairs to greet the guests before coming back up. They didn't want to have an ill-mannered daughter-in-law in their family. At that moment, Seonmi came up with a clever idea. While Jae-ho was being praised by the company president and his wife for his youthful talent, he suddenly received a text message from Seonmi. Seonmi asked Jae-ho to meet her at the hotel where they had met before. Anxious, Jae-ho didn't explain himself to the president and his wife and hurriedly left. After Jae-ho left, Seonmi pretended to change her clothes and came to the living room. Jae-ho's hasty departure made the president and his wife very unhappy. After all, Sunja had prepared a lot of food in anticipation of Jae-ho's arrival. After dinner, Sunja urges Seonmi to take this opportunity to help Junkyu. At this time, Jae-ho, who has been deceived, waits until the employees leave work but does not see Seonmi. He realizes that he has been deceived by Seonmi. Seonmi throws her cell phone into the water so that Jae-ho cannot contact her. She told Jungkyu that she had received a harassing phone call and accidentally dropped her cell phone in the water and broke it. Heartbroken, Jae-ho asked Hyami out. At this moment, only Hyami was willing to listen to his heartache. Jae-ho knew that Seonmi was deliberately avoiding him. He told Hyami that he didn't want to destroy Seonmi's current happiness. He just wanted to see Seonmi one last time and let her see her daughter who missed her mother. Jae-ho doesn't understand why Seonmi is so heartless that she won't even see her own daughter. Hyami says that maybe Seonmi has her reasons. Drunk, Jae-ho walks home in pain. Hyami silently follows behind him to make sure he doesn't get into an accident. That day, Jae-ho takes his mother to the hospital for a checkup. It is confirmed that his mother does indeed have Alzheimer's disease. This made Jae-ho worry about his mother even more and feel even more sorry for his daughter. Lucy had never received her mother's love. If she lost her grandmother's love as well, he didn't know how much her heart would be hurt. Since Jae-ho had to stay at the hospital with his mother, he asked Hyami to pick up Lucy from school. Lucy really liked being with Hyami. Hyami often took Lucy out to play. This allowed poor Lucy to feel a little bit of maternal love, but they were biological mother and daughter. Yet because of the vicious Seonmi, they didn't know each other. Seonmi hid the truth and allowed her daughter to be loved by two mothers. Because of her fondness for Hyami, Lucy took out a sketch of her mother. When Hyami saw the person in the sketch, she was shocked. Even with the sketch, she couldn't be sure that the person in the drawing was Seonmi, so she asked Lucy if she knew her mother's name. Unfortunately, Jae-ho had never mentioned his wife's name to Lucy. That day, Hyami happened to run into the manager of the coffee shop where Seonmi used to work. The manager had no idea about Seonmi's current situation, so she asked Hyami if Seonmi was married to Jae-ho. At that moment, Hyami was a little confused, but she didn't think of Jae-ho because the manager had been friends with Seonmi. She asked Hyami for Seonmi's phone number and immediately called it. However, she found that Seonmi's number was no longer in service. In order to help the manager contact Seonmi, Hyami had no choice but to call Jungkyu. Seonmi had instructed Jungkyu not to give her number to Hyami. Hyami had no choice but to give the store manager's number to Jungkyu. Seonmi was shocked to find out that it was the store manager and immediately went to look for her. She warned the store manager that no matter who asked about her and Jae-ho, she must pretend to know nothing. Jae-ho received a more painful result after his mother's condition was confirmed again. The doctor told him that because of brain atrophy, there was no chance of recovery. As time passed, she would forget everything. Jae-ho's mother was afraid that she would forget her granddaughter. She was very afraid that when she really forgot everything, who would take care of poor Lucy? Jae-ho's mother saw that Lucy liked Hyami's family very much. Hyami's family was also very good to Lucy, so she asked Hyami's mother if she could help take care of Lucy in the future. Hyami's mother was more than happy to help take care of Lucy, and Lucy effectively ended up living with her biological mother. Seonmi accidentally overheard Jae-ho's mother discussing her condition. However, her hidden identity was discovered by Hyami. That day, Hyami encountered the store manager again. She casually asked him if he knew Jae-ho. The store manager denied it because he had been paid to keep quiet. However, his nervous expression gave Hyami away, so she called Jae-ho and asked him if he knew the store manager of the coffee shop. Jae-ho said that he not only knew him but was also very familiar with him. After hanging up the phone, Hyami fell into deep thought. She thought of the sketch that looked like Seonmi. She thought of what the store manager had said about Seonmi being pursued by a soldier, and Jae-ho's earlier tearful confession that he suspected he had been abandoned because he was poor. Hyami seemed to understand something. She hurried to Jae-ho's office to confirm it. When Hyami heard Seonmi's name, she immediately fell into despair. Jae-ho also realized that Hyami might know Seonmi. He anxiously tried to get the answer out of Hyami, but just then, Jungkyu also arrived at the office. Hyami looked at Jungkyu with a slightly sympathetic gaze. Jungkyu had been living in Seonmi's lies without knowing anything. Hyami didn't expose Seonmi's hidden identity right there. She immediately found Seonmi and vented her anger. She swore that she would expose Seonmi's evil deeds to the public. Seonmi saw no need to hide anymore and directly threatened Hyami that if she dared to expose the truth, she would make sure Hyami would never see her child again. Hyami remained unfazed and insisted she wouldn't be fooled by Seonmi's tricks anymore. She was determined to tell Jae-ho the truth. Seonmi, fearing for her safety, chased after Hyami and dragged her into the car. Hayami hadn't directly revealed Seonmi's true identity in front of Jaeho and Junkyu. She just thought that Seonmi might really have something she couldn't say. But now Hayami realized that Seonmi was a shameless person with a thick skin. Seonmi now wanted to portray herself as a victim. She told Hayami that Jaeho had abandoned her when she was about to give birth to his child. Jaeho was afraid that she and the child would become obstacles to his success. When he returned from military service, he cut off all contact with her. Jaeho is now trying to find me because he wants to destroy my happy family. If it weren't for Jaeho repeatedly telling Hayami about his longing for Seonmi, Hayami might have believed Seonmi's lies. Hayami didn't want to listen to Seonmi's shameless and ridiculous excuses anymore. After the car stopped, she hurriedly got out to find Jaeho. Seonmi rushed forward again to stop her. She asked Hayami if she was jealous of her current life. Hayami didn't have the same dirty thoughts as Seonmi. She just said that she wanted to live with her daughter. Hearing this, Seonmi understood. She directly threatened Hayami with her child. Now Hayami didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, Hayami's cousin walked over and heard their conversation. Hayami had no choice but to admit to her cousin that Seonmi was Lucy's mother. Haran was furious at Hayami's actions. She asked her why she let Seonmi torment her and didn't reveal the truth. But Hayami believed that even if she revealed the truth, she wouldn't be able to get her child back. Moreover, it would likely hurt the young hearts of both children. Haran believed that revealing the truth would allow them to regain custody of the child. After hearing her cousin's words, Hayami was tempted, but she still wanted to see how Seonmi treated Lucy, so she threatened Seonmi to come out and meet Lucy, or else she wouldn't blame her for revealing the truth. The three agreed to meet at a coffee shop. When Seonmi saw Lucy, she felt annoyed. Hayami wanted to leave to give them space to be alone. At that moment, Jaeho, who had secretly followed Hayami, appeared there. Jaeho told Hayami to take their daughter out first. Then the two of them sat down to talk alone. Jaeho thought that Seonmi would be moved after seeing her daughter, but Seonmi said that Lucy was not her daughter. She told Jaeho not to bother her anymore. Jaeho understood that Seonmi's existence would cause Lucy immense harm, so he tells Hayami that he always thought Seonmi was dead and that she should continue to believe that. Seonmi will no longer exist in the world of himself and his daughter. This makes Hayami realize how painful Jaeho's heart is at this moment, but it also makes Hayami feel very uncomfortable. She is very angry at Seonmi's cruel and ruthless behavior. She calls Seonmi and tells her not to think that hurting Jaeho like this will end everything. However, Junkyu overheard her words. Junkyu was suspicious and hurriedly found Hayami alone to ask her what it meant. Could it be that his wife was having an affair? Hayami wanted to tell him that Jaeho and Junkyu had a daughter, but before she could, her younger brother rushed out of the room. Youngho thought that Junkyu was bullying his sister again and immediately attacked him. If Hayami hadn't stopped him in time, Junkyu might have died. If Hayami hadn't stopped her brother in time, Junkyu might have died there. Junkyu returned home in a rage and angrily asked his wife if she was treating him like a fool. Seonmi would never tell him about her affair with Jaeho, so she pretended to be wronged and told her husband that she had indeed had a man before they got married. Now that man had reappeared and was tormenting her. He's forcing me to meet him, or else he'll come to our house to find me. Then Seonmi added that Hayami had colluded with her ex-boyfriend to torment him. This way, Hayami could take advantage of the situation to return to this family and become a wealthy daughter-in-law. One couldn't help but admire Seonmi's ability to fabricate lies. Junkyu immediately developed hatred toward Hayami. Seonmi worried every day that Hayami would expose her hidden secret. Just then, she saw Hayami crossing the street alone after work. A terrifying thought instantly popped into her mind. But Seonmi ultimately gave up on the unrealistic idea of killing Hayami to silence her. After all, she was well aware of the consequences of such an action. She just wanted to scare Hayami with this method. Seonmi warned Hayami, "If you dare expose my secret, I will kill you next time." What Seonmi didn't expect was that Hayami didn't care about her life at all. "Not only will I get back everything I lost, but I'll also destroy you." Seonmi never imagined that the usually weak Hayami had such a vicious side. At that moment, Jaeho rushed over. Jaeho didn't even look at Seonmi and left with Hayami. Seonmi was extremely worried that Hayami would reveal the truth that she was Junkyu's wife in a fit of anger. However, Hayami was still worried that she would really push Seonmi too far and threaten her daughter's life. She still didn't tell Jaeho about Seonmi's identity, but the next revelation of the truth finally made Hayami completely explode at Seonmi. That day, Hayami's younger brother was doing business on the side of the road. He accidentally ran into Taemin, who had once defrauded him into selling fake furniture. He tried hard to catch Taemin, but in the end, he let him get away. So Youngho told his sister that he had been cheated by that man, but Hayami knew that Taemin was Junkyu's driver. She told her brother not to act rashly without solid evidence. The next day, Hyami found Jaeho and asked him if he knew Taemin and how he had become Jungkyu's driver. Jaeho told her that Taemin had become Jungkyu's driver through Seonmi's introduction, as Hyami had suspected. Her brother had been deceived by Taemin, and it must have been Seonmi who had orchestrated it. If it hadn't been for her brother being deceived, leading to such serious consequences, she wouldn't have been forced to divorce. She wouldn't have been forced to give her daughter to Seonmi. Hyami finally understood that all the misfortunes that had befallen her family were planned by Seonmi. She was heartbroken and regretted becoming best friends with such a vicious woman. Hyami sent text messages to Seonmi, Jungkyu, and Jaeho, asking them to meet her. Then she completely transformed herself. Kindness is cruelty to oneself. She decided to launch a revenge attack on Seonmi. Seonmi arrived at the meeting place and was very surprised to see her husband there. At that moment, the transformed Hyami arrived on time and welcomed her. Seonmi immediately understood what was about to happen and turned to run away. But when she ran outside, Jaeho also arrived at the same time. Seonmi was so shocked to see her ex-boyfriend in front of her husband that she almost collapsed. In order not to let her husband know about their relationship, Seonmi lied and said that she had just met Jaeho for the first time. Jaeho agreed with Seonmi's story. Hyami was very surprised to hear this. Seonmi was so panicked that she couldn't stay any longer and left, pretending to be calm. At this moment, Jaeho finally realized that Seonmi was Jungkyu's wife and felt very self-deprecating. He asked Hyami if she had called him here today to expose Seonmi's identity. She had fought so hard to keep the secret before, so why was she revealing it now? Hyami didn't want to apologize to Jaeho for this. She just wanted to tell him that she finally realized that everything that had happened to her was Seonmi's doing. Now that she was no longer hiding anything, she wanted to clear her name and take revenge on Seonmi to get back everything she had lost. Hyami hurriedly caught up with Jungkyu and asked him to let her see Seonmi's ex-boyfriend. Jungkyu had recently been suspecting that Seonmi was hiding something from him. He no longer cares about Seonmi and follows Hyami to the private room. But when he arrives, the room is empty. This makes Jungkyu very angry. Thinking that Hyami is playing with him, Seonmi finds an opportunity to stir up conflict. She tells her husband that Hyami is playing with him to get revenge on him. She is enjoying seeing him angry after being played with. Jaeho angrily chases after Seonmi, who is preparing to leave alone. Seonmi directly states that she only accepted Jaeho's love because she thought he was a rich man. Jaeho is heartbroken that his love and longing for Seonmi over the years was just wishful thinking. He never imagined that Seonmi was such a heartless and vicious woman. Today, Hyami's plan to reveal Seonmi and Jaeho's relationship in front of Jungkyu failed. She thought Jaeho was helping her, but Jaeho wanted Hyami to stop revealing the secret. He believed that revealing the secret would only hurt their child in the end. Hyami was very sad to hear this. She had no other thoughts but to get custody of her daughter back. Hyami said she had thought it through and would never give up. Jaeho threw Seonmi's sketch into the trash can in his office. The child would not need such a heartless mother in the future. However, when Hyami was taking out the trash at night, she accidentally found the sketch and immediately came up with a plan. She handed the sketch directly to Jungkyu, who was getting ready to leave work. Jungkyu immediately recognized the woman in the sketch as his wife. However, Hyami tells Jungkyu that she found it in the company trash. Jungkyu is immediately filled with doubt. Who would throw his wife's words in the company? After returning home, he takes out the sketch and asks his wife who the woman in the picture is. Seonmi immediately says that she doesn't know the person in the picture. At this moment, Jungkyu deliberately puts on a puzzled expression. He asked Seonmi again why Hyami would give her the painting. Seonmi knew that Hyami was declaring war on her. Hyami did not hide the fact that she gave the painting to Jungkyu from Jaeho. Jaeho repeatedly emphasized that he did not want to reveal his past relationship with Seonmi. However, Jaeho did not know the injustice and pain Hyami had endured. The reason Hyami had never directly spoken about her relationship with Seonmi was because she was considering Jaeho's feelings. But she would never give up on her revenge against Seonmi. No matter what Jaeho said, she would not change her mind. However, at this point, Jaeho had already developed real feelings for Hyami. Jaeho did not want her to become a heartless and vicious woman like Seonmi. After hearing Jaeho's confession, Hyami's silent heart stirred slightly. Seonmi now had to find a way to get Jaeho to leave the company, so she took advantage of her husband's absence to sneak out and meet Jaeho. This scene was witnessed by Hyami. She immediately informed Jungkyu of the situation. Jungkyu hurriedly turned the car around and rushed back to the company. Jaeho doesn't want to deal with Seonmi when she arrives. Seonmi won't let it go and warns Jaeho to quit his job immediately. Jaeho doesn't say a word and turns to leave, but Jungkyu has rushed back and seen the whole thing. He finally realizes that he has been played by Seonmi all along. Seonmi tries to argue, but her husband won't give her a chance. Jungkyu vented his anger on Jaeho. He believed that Jaeho and Seonmi had been manipulating him behind his back. Jungkyu angrily warned Jaeho that he wouldn't let him off so easily. Jaeho felt helpless in the face of Jungkyu's irrational behavior. That evening, Jungkyu demanded a divorce from Seonmi in front of his parents. He also reveals that Seonmi is Jaeho's ex-girlfriend. Seonmi pretends to be wronged and pitiful, takes her luggage, and runs away from home. At this moment, Perrin runs over and hugs Seonmi tightly, not letting her leave. Because of Perrin, Seonmi's father-in-law lets her stay at home. Seonmi then reveals a victorious smile. She immediately told Hyami that even if she told Jaeho the truth, so what? Thanks to her daughter, she wasn't kicked out of the house. Let her see what else she had up her sleeve. Seonmi hid her ugly past before marriage and married into a wealthy family, which made President Lee and his wife very dissatisfied with her. Sunja would never allow her precious son to wear clothes that someone else had worn. She decided to make Jungkyu divorce Seonmi. Seonmi, who overheard the conversation, didn't seem to care. She was determined not to lose her status as the wealthy family's daughter-in-law so easily. Jaeho felt a bit angry that Hyami had exposed the secret. He was worried that this would hurt his daughter. Jaeho warned Hyami not to involve Lucy in this matter no matter what. Although Hyami wanted to reveal that Lucy was Seonmi's daughter, she didn't want Lucy to be harmed because of it. President Lee wanted Jaeho to go abroad to handle business, and have Jungkyu meet with Jaeho at the company because of Seonmi's involvement. Things would inevitably be awkward, but Jaeho had already decided to resign and leave the company. At that moment, Jungkyu walked into the office. He knew Jaeho had a daughter named Lucy, and Seonmi was Jaeho's ex-girlfriend. So Jungkyu directly asked Jaeho if the girl named Lucy was Seonmi's daughter. Jaeho left the office immediately to protect his daughter. But the more Jaeho reacted this way, the more certain Jungkyu became that Lucy was Seonmi's daughter. Jungkyu then found Hyami and confronted her. Hyami, of course, wouldn't tell him the truth, because she had promised Jaeho earlier that she wouldn't do anything to harm Lucy. In order to clear up the misunderstanding between herself and Lucy, Seonmi took the initiative to call her husband in front of Jaeho. She requested a paternity test to prove that Lucy was not his biological daughter. Jaeho thought that Seonmi was doing this to gain Jungkyu's trust. He didn't think much of it and refused to do the paternity test, handing his resignation letter to Jungkyu. He said that he would never see Seonmi again. This scene made Jungkyu believe that Seonmi and Jaeho were intentionally putting on a show for him. Jaeho had never doubted that Lucy was not his biological daughter. However, Hyami noticed that Seonmi's insistence on the paternity test with Lucy did not seem genuine. She shared her suspicions with Jaeho, but Jaeho still believed that Seonmi was just putting on a show for Jungkyu. He firmly believed that Lucy was his biological daughter. At this moment, Seonmi was also very troubled. She really wanted to do a paternity test with Lucy to secure her status as the wife of a wealthy family. She told Jungkyu that she would bring Lucy herself to do the paternity test to prove her innocence. Then Seonmi secretly ran to Hyami's mother's house and found Lucy. Unexpectedly, Jaeho's mother happened to be suffering from dementia at that moment. Seonmi took the opportunity to try to take Lucy away. Fortunately, Hyami returned just in time to stop Seonmi. However, Seonmi managed to obtain Lucy's hair. She then went to the hospital with Jungkyu for the DNA test. Meanwhile, Sunja met with Hyami alone. She still felt that Hyami, her former daughter-in-law, was better. Sunja hopes that Hyami will wait until Seonmi leaves and then remarry Jungkyu and return to the wealthy family. Hyami doesn't care about a man like Jungkyu, nor does she care about a wealthy lifestyle. She only says that if she can raise Perrin herself and wait until you take care of Seonmi, then she will consider remarrying. Seonmi also gets the paternity test results for Lucy. The results were as expected. Lucy and Seonmi are not biologically related. Seonmi triumphantly handed the report to Jungkyu. However, Jungkyu was not happy but deeply disappointed. Seonmi shouted that she and Lucy are not mother and daughter. Hyami heard this clearly. Hyami hurriedly stopped Jaeho, who was about to leave the company. In the parking lot, she told Jaeho not to leave the company and to hold on to his position. But Jaeho was determined. He didn't want to have anything to do with Seonmi anymore. At that moment, Hyami revealed that Lucy wasn't Seonmi's daughter. Jaeho couldn't believe the results. He believed Seonmi had fabricated the evidence. But Hyami once again spoke of her suspicions about Seonmi's unusual behavior. If Seonmi was really Lucy's mother, then why would she insist on doing a paternity test to expose the truth? This would not benefit Seonmi in any way. Seonmi is not the type of person who would do something without being absolutely certain. The only explanation is that Lucy is not Seonmi's biological daughter. Jaeho is terrified and immediately finds Seonmi to confirm the truth. However, Jae-ho still believes that Seonmi is lying to him. Seonmi directly handed the paternity test report to Jae-ho. If he still didn't believe it, she told him to bring Lucy out tomorrow and go to the hospital for another test. Jae-ho opened the report, which clearly stated that Lucy and Seonmi were not mother and daughter. He was momentarily at a loss. Since that was the case, Jae-ho also decided to undergo a paternity test with Lucy. Seonmi believed that by clarifying that she was not Lucy's mother, she could remain in the wealthy family. Originally, Sunja had intended to use this matter to expel this dirty daughter-in-law from the household. However, upon seeing the results, she was deeply disappointed. Nevertheless, Junkyu could not simply pretend that the events between Seonmi and Jae-ho had never occurred. Junkyu declared that seeing her face made him feel sick to his stomach. He unceremoniously kicked Seonmi out. Before leaving, Seonmi's mother-in-law came forward to give her her best wishes. After Seonmi left, Sunja asked Hayami to come back and remarry Junkyu in order to stabilize her granddaughter's emotions. But Hayami still insisted on her previous decision to raise Perrin herself. Only after Junkyu and Seonmi had completely drawn a line between them would she consider remarrying for her daughter's sake. Sunja was also worried that Hayami would change her mind after she handed over her granddaughter. Hayami said that she was Perrin's biological mother and would never hurt her. If Perrin was in the hands of that criminal Seonmi, it would be like throwing her away. Sunja was confused as to how Seonmi could be a criminal. Hayami tells her that Seonmi was behind her brother's sale of fake furniture. Jae-ho finally receives the results of his paternity test with Lucy. It is clear that he is not Lucy's father. This leaves those who do not know the truth completely confused. Lucy is not Seonmi's daughter, nor is she Jae-ho's daughter. Then whose child is she? Jae-ho angrily asks Seonmi what the situation between her and Lucy is. At this point, Seonmi outright denied ever being pregnant. She claimed she had never given birth to Jae-ho's child. Jae-ho was plunged into deep despair. Lucy had been the pillar of strength that had kept him going all these years. He couldn't understand where things had gone wrong or how things had become so cruel. Hayami, seeing Jae-ho on the brink of collapse, rushed to comfort him. No matter what, Lucy is your daughter, she said. Now you have to protect Lucy and find your real daughter as soon as possible. The first thing to do is to find proof that Seonmi was indeed pregnant. Seonmi is furious when she learns that her mother-in-law wants to secretly give Perrin to Hayami to raise. Perrin is Seonmi's only hope of staying in the wealthy family. She rushes to her father-in-law, crying and sniveling, to complain. She raised Perrin as her own daughter. Seonmi, who was kicked out, followed her father-in-law and returned to the wealthy family. Sunja was furious when she saw the despicable Seonmi return. She still insisted on her decision and immediately called Hayami to come and take Perrin away. President Lee wanted to stop her. Sunja directly framed Seonmi by revealing that Hayami's younger brother had sold fake furniture and ruined the company. As long as this was proven to be true, Seonmi would be completely kicked out of the wealthy family. So when Hayami arrived, she brought her younger brother with her as instructed by the chairman. As long as Hayami's younger brother could prove that Taemin had deceived him, then Seonmi would fall into an endless abyss. However, Young-ho directly admitted that it was his own doing and that he had not been deceived. This answer was unexpected and Hayami felt devastated. It turned out that Young-ho had lied not to protect his sister but because he had been threatened by Seonmi behind the scenes. Because before that, Young-ho had accidentally hit Taemin with his car. However, Taemin wasn't actually hit by Young-ho. He was just scared and couldn't move. But Young-ho thought the accident was serious. Seonmi took advantage of this and had Taemin pretend to be seriously injured to deceive Young-ho. So before Young-ho arrived at Jungkyu's house, Seonmi secretly called Young-ho and threatened him to admit that he had sold the fake furniture himself, or else she would report him for hit and run and send him to prison. So at this point, Young-ho had no choice but to hide the truth for his own sake. Young-ho's selfish behavior caused Hayami to lose the chance to get her daughter back. Seonmi, who was standing nearby, immediately showed a smug expression. When Hayami returned, she suspected that her brother had lied because he was threatened by Seonmi. Seeing his sister in pain, Young-ho felt very guilty. However, he was afraid of Seonmi's threats and could only choose to escape going to prison. He hid in a corner and used alcohol to numb his guilty conscience. He apologized to his sister over and over again in pain. The next day, Hayami's cousin was leaving the hospital after a checkup at the obstetrics and gynecology department when she accidentally saw Seonmi there. She overheard Seonmi planning to have her tubes untied so she could get pregnant. After returning home, she immediately told Hayami about it. Hayami quickly figured out that Seonmi's intention was to get pregnant with Jungkyu's child while she was still unable to conceive. Hayami immediately found Jungkyu and told him about Seonmi's surgery. She said that if Seonmi wanted to have the baby, then Perrin must be raised by herself. Sure enough, that night, Seonmi dressed up and covered herself with charming perfume, hoping to take advantage of the opportunity to get pregnant. Junkyu already knew that Seonmi had had surgery and didn't want to have anything to do with her. Jaeho and Hyami were trying to find evidence that Seonmi had been pregnant before. They found the only person who had seen Seonmi pregnant before: a wealthy woman. Seonmi had mistakenly believed that Jaeho was the wealthy woman's son. When she was about to give birth, she had gone to the wealthy woman's house and was seen by Lady Lee. Since Lucy was present, there were some things they couldn't let her hear. Hyami had to take Lucy out. However, Jaeho did not tell her that Lucy was not his biological daughter. He only said that Seonmi was a bad woman who abandoned her husband and child. Lady Lee was also indignant about this. She had always treated Jaeho as her own child. She was heartbroken by Seonmi's cruelty and vowed to punish that woman. Jaeho considered that Lucy did not want to make a big deal out of it, so he did not let Lady Lee get involved. But as they parted, Lady Lee still urged Jaeho to think it over. This matter couldn't just be swept under the rug. Hyami didn't go back with Jaeho but instead sat down alone with Lady Lee. Jaeho might have had reservations about pursuing Seonmi's mistakes, but at this point, Hyami couldn't just let Seonmi off the hook so easily for the sake of regaining custody of her child. She also didn't want Jaeho to silently bear the pain Seonmi had caused him. From the photo, Lady Lee confirmed that Seonmi was the woman who had come to see her. Lady Lee was very confused as to why this woman would appear in Hyami's wedding photo. Hyami then told her everything about how Seonmi was her best friend and how she had stolen her happiness. She also told her the truth that Lucy was not Jaeho's biological daughter. She hoped the lady could help Jaeho find his real biological daughter. Lady Lee didn't want to get involved in Jaeho's personal life, but after hearing this, she was so angry at Seonmi's actions that she decided to help Jaeho. Hyami then went to the hospital where Seonmi was having surgery. She suspected this was the hospital where Seonmi had given birth, so Hyami impersonated Seonmi and asked the doctor for the medical records. The nurse did not verify Hyami's identity and printed out all the records. When Hyami saw Seonmi's medical records, she was shocked beyond belief. She then handed the records to Jaeho to look at. It is now confirmed that Seonmi was pregnant and gave birth to a child. However, this report only contains the hospital's examination records. The hospital where Seonmi gave birth remains unknown. Therefore, they must force Seonmi to reveal where she took the child she gave birth to. At this point, Jaeho actually does not want Hyami to go to such extremes to regain custody of the child. He has deeply fallen in love with Hyami. He is afraid that Hyami will have to return to Junkyu's side for the sake of the child's custody. Therefore, Jaeho can only tell Hyami's mother about Hyami's current behavior. However, Jaeho did not deny that Seonmi was Lucy's biological mother. This made Hyami's mother very confused about Seonmi's behavior. She had her own child, yet she wanted to take Hyami's child. Jaeho's purpose this time was to persuade her to stop Hyami. When Hyami returned, her mother advised her not to be so stubborn. She didn't want Hyami to return to Junkyu for the sake of her daughter, but Hyami was unmoved. No matter what, she was going to take her daughter back. Her mother couldn't bear to see her daughter, who was already scarred, get hurt again. She tried her best to stop Hyami from taking revenge on Seonmi. She believed that no matter how vicious Seonmi was, she wouldn't hurt Perrin. But Hyami knew Seonmi's viciousness and remained unmoved by her mother's pleas. The mother can only watch helplessly in agony. Hyami hands over Seonmi's medical records from the hospital to Lady Lee. Lady Lee happens to be the second largest shareholder of the art museum and is very familiar with Sunja, so she decides to expose the fact that Seonmi gave birth to a child. When Sunja learns the truth, she is furious and cannot believe it. Upon returning home, she slapped Seonmi hard across the face. She scolded her for being shameless and ruining her son's life. In front of her family, Sunja revealed that Lady Lee had witnessed Dan Kyung's pregnancy with her own eyes. Seeing that there was no concrete evidence, Seonmi immediately accused Lady Lee of fabricating the lie with Jaeho. She also firmly promised Junkyu that she would prove her innocence. However, Hyami didn't give Seonmi a chance to prove her innocence. She directly sent the medical records from the hospital to Junkyu. Now Junkyu completely believed that Seonmi had given birth to a child before their marriage. He knew this must have been sent by Hyami. He confronted Hyami, asking if it was true and why she had given him this. Hyami told Junkyu bluntly that she was considering remarrying him. Upon hearing this, Jaeho wanted to die. Seonmi did not defend herself. Jaeho then asked Seonmi directly where the child she had given birth to had gone. Seonmi insisted that the child had died in an accident during childbirth. She was afraid that Jaeho would continue to question her, so she immediately put on a pitiful expression. She was already heartbroken over the loss of her child. She hoped that they would not continue to expose the painful scars in her heart. Although Junkyu obtained the evidence that Seonmi had given birth to a child, He did not give it to his parents. President Lee had completely lost hope in Seonmi and ordered his son to divorce her immediately. However, this hurt Jungkyu's pride. He did not want his father to control his life, so he hid the evidence. Jungkyu felt that Jaeho was more important to his father than he was as his son. Hyami's counterattack Seonmi wasn't going to let it go that easily. Hyami's brother's hit-and-run accident was something Seonmi had been using against her. This time, she decided to use Hyami's brother again, so she drove her car into Taemin, injuring him, and staged a hit-and-run scene. Then she had someone pretend to be a witness and report to the police that Hyami's brother was the hit-and-run driver. That day happened to be Hyami's birthday. Jaeho finally mustered up the courage to confess his feelings to Hyami again. He presented her with an expensive diamond necklace. Jaeho boldly took her hand and walked home together. Lucy was also there to celebrate Hyami's birthday. However, Hyami didn't know that this was the first time her biological daughter had celebrated her birthday with her. The family took a happy photo together, just as everyone was raising their glasses in celebration. 2 police officers arrived at the house to arrest Hyami's younger brother. His mother watched as her beloved son was taken away and broke down in tears, knowing that he had been tricked by Seonmi. Hyami's younger brother told her the whole truth. Youngho thought back to the scene and was certain that he hadn't hit Taemin. It was all Seonmi who had forced him into becoming a hit-and-run driver. Hyami understood that this was Seonmi's revenge against her. The most pressing matter now was to find Taemin and clear her brother's name. Seonmi hurriedly discharged Taemin from the hospital and hid him away. When Hyami arrived, the hospital room was already empty. She had no choice but to confront Seonmi face-to-face and demand that she hand over Taemin. But Seonmi acted as if it had nothing to do with her and denied that she had planned it. Hyami's desperate actions angered Jungkyu, who pushed her away forcefully. Jaeho immediately said that he would definitely find Taemin and expose the mastermind behind it all. The scene of Hyami being bullied earlier had deeply moved Jaeho. Hyami's mother was at home, worried that her son would be sent to prison, and cried every day. Hyami could only use the most foolish method of searching for Taemin in various hospitals, but to no avail. Because her brother had not found any useful evidence to prove his innocence, Youngho could only be sent to a detention center to await prosecution by the prosecutor's office. Seonmi had always fantasized about her biological daughter becoming the future owner of the entire group by taking on the identity of Jungkyu's daughter. But President Lee had had enough of Seonmi staying in this house. He told Seonmi to pack her bags and leave immediately. This frightened Seonmi so much that she knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. But President Lee had made up his mind and threatened that if Jungkyu didn't want to lose Seonmi, then he would leave with her. Jungkyu is indeed a useless man. He doesn't even have half of Seonmi's talent. The reason he found out about Seonmi's past and still refused to divorce her is because, on the one hand, he didn't want to be manipulated by his father. On the other hand, Seonmi was indeed a great help to him at work. Seonmi deliberately pretended to be afraid of her father-in-law in front of Jungkyu and wanted to leave the house. Jungkyu reassured Seonmi that he would deal with his father himself. This was exactly what Seonmi wanted. She wanted Jungkyu to fight with his father. She would never leave this wealthy family, even if it meant dying. She wanted to stay and be accepted by the whole family. In fact, she already had a plan. She would pretend to be pregnant. The vomiting Seonmi had been faking recently was just a setup. Jungkyu accompanied Seonmi to the hospital for a checkup. She took the opportunity during the examination to intentionally bump into a woman who had just finished her pregnancy test. She then secretly picked up the ultrasound image from the pregnancy test, with just one ultrasound image from someone else. Seonmi convinced the entire family that she was pregnant. Although Sunjet and her daughter had deep doubts about this, Seonmi claims that it's possible to get pregnant after tubal ligation. As the doctor said, President Lee can only tell Seonmi to take care of herself and the baby. Seonmi begins scheming to seduce Jungkyu into letting her work at the art museum. She even writes a report on new product releases for Jungkyu. This report earns Jungkyu praise from his father. Seonmi promised Jungkyu that as long as she was around, Jaeho would never have a chance to rise again. Jungkyu had always disliked Jaeho, so he specifically set up a department for Seonmi at the company. President Lee, upon hearing this, flew into a rage. He scolded Seonmi for not taking his position as chairman seriously. However, Seonmi remained calm and had already prepared her defense. She directly presented all the mistakes Jungkyu had made since managing the art gallery to the chairman. If Jungkyu continues like this, he will only push the art gallery into an endless abyss. Do you want your son to fall into ruin? If Jungkyu wants to be the heir, He must do something. Seonmi asked her father-in-law to trust her once. She would definitely make Junkyu a man of achievement. No father wants his son to amount to nothing. President Lee eventually acquiesced to Seonmi's newly established department. Seonmi's first order of business upon taking office was to remove Hayami. Hayami's presence posed an unknown threat to her ambitious plans. After all, if Parent's true identity as Junkyu's daughter were exposed, everything would be ruined. At this point, Junkyu had already been targeted by a group of con artists. Seonmi attended the company's new business expansion project, which was a secret development for Junkyu. She only sat there for a moment before realizing that the two people across from her were scammers. Seonmi couldn't help but sneer at them. However, she didn't tell Junkyu about this matter. Instead, she went to find the two scammers herself. After some negotiations, both parties reached an agreement. Seonmi would receive half of the profits in exchange for helping them deceive Junkyu. With Seonmi's persuasion, Junkyu not only took out his shares to use as collateral for the new project plan, but also gave them to Seonmi. These were shares of the parent company. When Seonmi found out, she was overjoyed. She immediately asked Junkyu to go to the two imposters and carry out the project expansion plan. At this point, Seonmi's goal was not only to get those shares, but also to drive Junkyu out of the company. Junkyu had already fallen into Seonmi's carefully laid trap. Now, only the two scammers remained. She once again found Taemin, who was hiding. She instructed Taemin to do something malicious to Hayami to harm Jaeho. As long as President Lee lost trust in Jaeho, the entire art museum would be under her control. After handing over his shares, Junkyu lost contact with the scammers. Only then did he realize that he had been deceived. At this moment, Seonmi was dividing the spoils with the swindlers. She promised them that once she got control of the head office, she would give them twice the price they had paid her. Seonmi was overjoyed at getting what she wanted. Next, she had to drive Junkyu out of the art gallery. Without hesitation, she revealed the truth about Junkyu's deception to the reporters. When she returned home, she saw Junkyu looking anxious and pretended to be concerned. Then she secretly revealed a sinister smile. The next day, the truth about Junkyu being scammed was published in the newspaper. President Lee felt even more disappointed in his useless son. At this moment, Seonmi once again put on a brilliant performance, pretending to be in a hurry and rushing over to tell Junkyu to run out quickly. Junkyu immediately ran outside. Seonmi was worried that her father-in-law would find out that Junkyu had mortgaged his shares, so she scared her mother-in-law by saying that Junkyu might really be kicked out of the house if she told the chairman. Seonmi immediately called Taemin to take revenge on Hayami. Hayami had been bullied by Seonmi ever since she was transferred to the factory, but she didn't want to admit defeat to Seonmi and was the last one to leave work every day. That night, as usual, Hayami was the only one left in the factory kitchen, working overtime. At that moment, Taemin poured the flammable liquid he had prepared outside and lit it on fire. The fire spread quickly, engulfing the entire kitchen. When Hayami noticed the fire and tried to escape, it was already too late. Fortunately, the fire department arrived in time and rescued Hayami, who was unconscious. At the same time, Jaeho was being reprimanded by the chairman because of Junkyu. Jaeho was also helpless because he knew nothing about it. Just then, the secretary rushed in and reported the factory fire. This scared the chairman so much that he immediately sent Jaeho to the scene to handle it. When Jaeho heard that the injured person was Hayami, he rushed to the hospital. This was exactly what Seonmi wanted. Jaeho arrived at the hospital and stayed by Hayami's side, extremely worried about her. Fortunately, Hayami was treated and was fine. Seonmi went to the chairman and reported the situation at the fire scene. She falsely accused Jaeho of disobeying orders and rushing to the hospital to take care of Hayami, completely ignoring the factory fire. Seonmi said that she was the one who cleaned up the mess at the scene of the fire. President Lee was also very angry with Jaeho's behavior. Seonmi blamed Hayami for the factory fire. She forced Hayami to leave the company completely or go to jail. Hayami is not worried about Seonmi's threats, but she does not want Jaeho to suffer because of her. In the end, she submits her resignation letter to Seonmi. However, Hayami declares that this does not mean that she is giving up. "I will make you regret everything you have done. When the time comes, I will make you risk everything to fight me." After saying this, Hayami turns around and leaves. Junkyu thought that Seonmi would wholeheartedly help him become the heir to the group. However, he didn't know that he had lost his direction in Seonmi's lies. This crisis directly shook the foundation of the group that the chairman had worked so hard to build. It also caused his mother to lose all of her family's assets in order to help Junkyu. Seonmi and the leader of the scammers not only wanted to steal money, but also shift all the blame for Junkyu's deception onto Jaeho. Following Seonmi's plan, the man forced Junkyu to keep his promise and repay the money as soon as possible. Otherwise, They would sell the mortgaged company shares to settle the debt. This left Junkyu in a panic, and he immediately called Seonmi to ask her to think of a way to raise the money. The more Junkyu pleaded, the happier Seonmi became. Under Seonmi's influence, Sunja was worried about her son and had no choice but to sell all the real estate under her name. Sunja wanted to help her son get back the mortgaged shares as soon as possible, but that wasn't Seonmi's main goal. Then, President Lee suddenly discovered that the group's stock price was falling rapidly. After investigation, he learned that the second largest shareholder was selling a large number of shares. In order to stabilize the stock price, President Lee quickly found the man who had mortgaged Junkyu's shares. He assured him that he would repay Junkyu's debt and retrieve the shares in the near future. President Lee wanted to know who had instructed him to do this. The man, following his prior agreement with Seonmi, immediately named Jae-ho. Thus, the chairman, who had once trusted Jae-ho so deeply, lost all faith in him due to Seonmi's fabricated lies. President Lee ordered Jae-ho to resign and leave the company. Jae-ho was filled with sorrow and couldn't speak. Upon learning of Jae-ho's fate, Seonmi immediately ran over to gloat and wish him well. Jae-ho knew that Seonmi was behind all of this, but without any evidence, he could do nothing. President Lee was furious about his son mortgaging his shares. He was heartbroken to see such a talented person leave his company. However, Jae-ho's departure meant Junkyu's rise. The position of company president naturally fell to Junkyu. All of this was within Seonmi's expectations. Jae-ho was furious that he had devoted himself to the company only to be labeled as one of those crooks. He was unwilling to bear such a stigma and be kicked out of the company. Hayami took the drunk Jae-ho home. Under the dim lights, the two people with similar fates finally opened their hearts to each other and accepted one another. The next day, Lucy suddenly felt unwell. Jae-ho and Hayami took Lucy to the hospital for a checkup. Taemin saw this and immediately told Seonmi. Seonmi couldn't help but feel worried and afraid. The doctor told Jae-ho that Lucy had been diagnosed with bone marrow leukemia. The obedient and understanding girl endured immense pain during the examination. What was infuriating was that at a time when Lucy desperately needed to find a relative for a bone marrow transplant to save her life, Seonmi refused to reveal Lucy's true identity. Jae-ho felt utterly devastated and blamed himself for not taking better care of Lucy. He wasn't afraid that Lucy would be taken away by her biological mother after finding her family, but rather that Lucy wouldn't find her family in time to receive the bone marrow transplant and would leave this world forever. However, Jae-ho didn't know that Lucy's biological mother was right in front of him. Unfortunately, neither of them knew the truth. That day, Junkyu followed his father's instructions and went with Seonmi to visit Lucy. Perhaps it was the bond of blood. Junkyu hated Jae-ho, but he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity toward Lucy at first sight. What surprised him even more was that Lucy was born on the same day as Perrin. Seonmi watched Junkyu and Lucy interacting warmly and grew concerned. She urged Junkyu to leave immediately, but then Seonmi noticed two familiar green bags on either side. She clearly remembered that this bag was the one she had left behind when she abandoned Lucy, because she had never admitted that Lucy was the child she had abandoned at Jae-ho's door. However, this scene was witnessed by Hayami. Hayami then told Jae-ho about it. She speculated that Seonmi must have recognized the bag, which is why she looked so frightened. However, Jae-ho was also helpless because Seonmi had previously denied abandoning Lucy. After leaving, Seonmi was worried that the bag would expose her as the one who abandoned Lucy, so she instructed Taemin to retrieve the bag and destroy it by the end of the day. That evening, Hayami was walking home with Lucy's clothes in the bag. Taemin followed behind and, at the right moment, rushed forward to grab the bag from Hayami's hands. But Hayami knew that the bag was an important clue to finding Lucy's biological mother, so she fought for her life and refused to let go. Taemin questioned Hayami suspiciously, asking if Lucy's mother was Seonmi. Hayami told him that after testing, Seonmi was not Lucy's mother. Taemin was even more confused, saying that he had handed the child to Seonmi himself. He suddenly realized that he had said the wrong thing and hurriedly ran away. But Hayami had overheard something important. She immediately discussed what had just happened with Jae-ho. She believed that Taemin must know the secret Seonmi was hiding. The next day, Hayami went to Taemin's mother's house and left a note with her contact information. But Taemin was also confused. In his understanding, Seonmi was Lucy's biological mother, yet Hayami seemed completely unconcerned about Lucy. Where had the child she had carried out of the hospital herself gone? In order for Lucy to have her surgery as soon as possible, Hayami did not hesitate to accept the bone marrow match test. However, her actions scared Seonmi half to death. Because Hayami was Lucy's biological mother, There was a high possibility that the bone marrow would be a match. She would never allow Lucy to live and threaten her daughter. So Xianmi found Taemin again and asked him to do one last thing for her. Then she took out a stack of envelopes filled with large bills. Xianmi asked Junkyu to kill Hyami tonight, but Taemin's next move was unexpected. Although Taemin was a bad person, he still had a conscience. He had long been afraid of Xianmi's evil deeds. This time, he deliberately agreed to Xianmi's request to get rid of Hyami in order to get the money and leave with his mother. The next day, Xianmi was furious with Taemin when she realized she had been deceived. She immediately ordered someone to find Taemin. President Lee did not believe all of Xianmi's lies. After a series of secret investigations, he finally discovered the truth that Xianmi was working with the leader of the fraudsters. He first called Jaeho to come to the company to handle matters related to Xianmi. Since Xianmi was already at the company, she met with the chairman first. President Lee intended to expose Xianmi's malicious true nature today. He directly presented the evidence and questioned Xianmi about her true motives for taking the company shares. Xianmi finally tore off her disguise in front of the chairman. If it weren't for the chairman forcing her to divorce and expelling her from the family, she wouldn't have done such a thing. President Lee warned Xianmi to return the shares immediately. Xianmi arrogantly declared that if anyone dared to provoke her, she would sell all the company shares. President Lee, overcome by anger, fainted. Xianmi panicked and prepared to call for emergency assistance. But suddenly, she realized that if the chairman were to die like this, she would be safe. When Jaeho arrived at the company, he saw the chairman being carried away by an ambulance. He gave Xianmi a meaningful look before following the ambulance. Standing there, Xianmi revealed a sinister smile. President Lee was fortunately saved after emergency treatment. The doctor stated that since there seemed to be a time gap between the chairman's unconsciousness and discovery, his awareness of time and space might be impaired upon waking. There was also a possibility of short-term memory loss and language disorders. Upon hearing this, Xianmi finally relaxed. However, she then decided to take advantage of the situation to have Junkyu inherit the company. After returning home, Xianmi began fantasizing about becoming the mistress of the house. Meanwhile, Hyami and Jaeho received some bad news. Their bone marrow did not match Lucy's. Now, they could only hope for a donor whose bone marrow matched Lucy's. However, the doctor also offered another suggestion. That was to find the umbilical cord blood that had been stored when Lucy was born. But this also made the two of them very distressed. They had no idea where Lucy was born or if her umbilical cord blood had been stored. Lucy knew that she was very sick. After all these days of Hyami taking care of her, she felt a warmth she had never felt before. Like a mother's love. Seeing Hyami leave, poor Lucy suddenly felt afraid. Lucy cried and said she didn't want Aunt Hyami to leave. That day, Taemin was found by Xianmi's men. A group of people cornered Taemin and beat him up badly. Fortunately, Taemin managed to escape with his last breath. He wanted to tell Hyami everything he knew to atone for his sins. Hyami was eager to find out who Lucy's real mother was, but Taemin had no idea that Xianmi had switched the babies at the hospital. He was also confused about where Lucy had come from. Hyami knew that to uncover the truth, they had to investigate the hospital where Xianmi had given birth. Fortunately, Taemin still remembered the name of the hospital where Xianmi had given birth. However, when Hyami heard the name of the hospital, she was completely shocked. She unexpectedly discovered that Perrin and Lucy might have been born on the same day. Hyami went to the hospital to inquire about the records of Xianmi giving birth there years ago. The staff stated that the hospital had regulations prohibiting the disclosure of others' privacy. Hyami immediately asked if there were any other women who gave birth at the hospital at the same time. After checking the records, the staff told Hyami that there was indeed another woman who gave birth there. Hyami immediately concluded that the woman must be Xianmi. To determine whether the child Xianmi gave birth to was dead or still alive, she followed the address Taemin gave her to find the place where Xianmi had lived after giving birth. The landlord told her that Xianmi had brought the baby home and lived there for 4 or 5 days before disappearing without a trace. Hyami then told Jaeho everything she had found out. Jaeho was very excited, saying that his child was not dead as Xianmi had said. From this, they were convinced that Lucy had a close connection with the missing child. Jaeho was anxious to go to Xianmi to ask for the truth, but Hyami stopped him in time. She told him to calm down and look for the child. They had to think carefully in order to protect the child and expose Xianmi's true colors and find the truth. Hyami first deliberately went to find Xianmi and asked her why she had been hiding the fact that she had given birth to a child in the same hospital as her. Xianmi became nervous when she heard this, but she denied it and said that it was all a lie. Hyami said that Taemin had told her everything. Since she wouldn't admit it, she would start looking for clues from the places where she had lived. In fact, Hayami deliberately let Seonmi know her intention. This would allow Seonmi to lose her composure and reveal her weakness. Seonmi was worried that Hayami would go to the place where she had hidden and lived while pregnant to investigate. She hurried over and not only paid the overdue rent but also gave a large sum of money as hush money. Hayami and Jaeho had been waiting outside for a long time and caught Seonmi as soon as she came out. The two of them kept pressing Seonmi about where the child was. Seonmi was worried that if they continued investigating, they would really find out the truth. She had no choice but to admit that the child was still alive and doing well. Jaeho advised them to stop if they didn't want the child to get hurt. The two of them stopped talking to Seonmi and left. Seonmi's heart was filled with panic. In the dead of night, Hayami couldn't sleep at all. She was thinking about why such a selfish woman would be so devoted to someone else's daughter. She remembered very clearly that Seonmi had said that Perrin was her own daughter. At that moment, Hayami suddenly understood something. In order to verify the truth she believed in her heart, she went to the obstetrics and gynecology department and called Seonmi, pretending that she had found Lucy's biological mother. Seonmi rushed over in a panic and asked Hayami what she meant. Hayami told her directly, "I am Lucy's mother. Back then, you gave birth to a child here with me. When no one was looking, you switched our children." But Seonmi refused to admit anything Hayami said. She even threatened Hayami that if she dared to pursue the matter of the child, she would be heartless. "Not only would it be the end of you and me, but also the end of our two children. I will never forgive anyone who stands in the way of my future." Seonmi's behavior made Hayami hesitate for the sake of the child. However, Seonmi's attitude made Hayami 100% certain that her guess was correct. After returning home, Hayami revealed the truth that she was Lucy's biological mother. In order to further confirm the truth, Hayami decided to have a paternity test done on Lucy. Before long, Jaeho received the test results. However, he did not look at them first, but handed them directly to Hayami. Hayami carefully took out the report. The report stated that Hayami and Lucy were 100% confirmed to be mother and daughter. At that moment, Hayami finally found her real daughter. Over the years, she had witnessed with her own eyes the tremendous harm her daughter had suffered without a mother's care. Hayami held Lucy tightly in her arms and vowed to spend the rest of her life making up for the harm her daughter had suffered over the years. Jaeho gave Hayami a photo album of Lucy's childhood. Hayami was very grateful to Jaeho for allowing her to learn about her daughter's growth in this way. Hayami did not hide anything from her family and revealed the entire truth. The entire family was filled with unbearable anger towards Seonmi's heartless actions. To ensure the safety of the two children, Hayami hoped that they would not disclose the truth to the outside world and avoid causing trouble for Seonmi. President Lee regained consciousness in the hospital. Although he did not lose his memory, he had completely forgotten everything that happened on the day of the incident with Seonmi. Seonmi deliberately pretended to have stomach pains and went to the hospital so that her fake pregnancy would not be exposed. Then she pretended to call Jungkyu and told him that she had miscarried. When Jungkyu arrived at the hospital, Seonmi pretended to be heartbroken. She blamed herself for working too hard every day and not taking care of her body, which led to this result. Jungkyu, who had been deceived, felt very guilty. After returning home, Jungkyu told Seonmi not to worry about work and to get some rest. However, Seonmi questioned Jungkyu in front of her mother-in-law. "Now that the company is gone, how can you handle those complicated financial settlements?" Seonmi directly criticized Jungkyu. Sunja was so angry that she was unhappy on the spot. Seonmi uses the pain of losing her child to make her mother-in-law understand her feelings. Sunja follows her to her room and scolds Seonmi for looking down on her son. She orders Seonmi to quit her job and stay home to be a housewife. Upon hearing this, Seonmi immediately puts on her acting skills. She cries and apologizes to her mother-in-law. She said that she had just lost a child and might not be able to have children in the future, and that she was in so much pain that she said some crazy things. She hoped that her mother-in-law would not hold it against her. However, as soon as her mother-in-law left, Seonmi immediately broke into a happy smile. It's a shame that Seonmi's acting skills aren't being put to use in Hollywood. Meanwhile, Hayami still hadn't found a bone marrow match for Lucy. She secretly went to find Jungkyu and pleaded with him to undergo a bone marrow match for Lucy. However, Hayami did not reveal Lucy's identity to Jungkyu. Since Jungkyu genuinely liked Lucy from the bottom of his heart, he had no hesitation and went to the hospital for the bone marrow match test. Unfortunately, Seonmi found out about this. Seonmi did not want to see Jungkyu save Lucy. She angrily tells Jungkyu that he must not donate his bone marrow. Jungkyu finds Seonmi's reaction unbelievable. If someone can really survive because of his bone marrow, no matter who it is, he will donate it without hesitation. Seonmi is so anxious that she can only stare at him. Unfortunately, although Lucy is Jungkyu's biological daughter, Their bone marrow is not a match. Junkyu was about to leave with regret when Hayami asked him to talk to her. There was one last way to save Lucy. That was to get the umbilical cord blood that had been stored when Lucy was born. Junkyu immediately disagreed. He would never allow anyone to touch the umbilical cord blood that would save his daughter's life. Hayami finally had to tell Junkyu the truth about Lucy's identity. Our daughter is Lucy. She was switched at birth and abandoned at someone else's doorstep. Junkyu couldn't believe it. Hayami had no choice but to show him the paternity test results to prove what she was saying. At that moment, Junkyu couldn't stop the tears from flowing. His biological daughter, who should have been living a happy life, had been switched at birth, and he had become the husband of that evil woman. Sleeping in the same bed every night, Junkyu came to the hospital room with a heavy heart to visit Lucy as her father. Seeing his daughter suffering from illness, Junkyu held back his tears and spoke encouraging words to Lucy. Hayami and Junkyu didn't waste any time and successfully applied for Lucy's umbilical cord blood transplant surgery. At this moment, Junkyu finally saw Seonmi's insidious and vicious true colors. She was the one who destroyed the happy family he and Hayami should have had. After many days of rest, the lost memories of President Lee began to reappear in his mind. Although he couldn't remember what happened, he was certain that Seonmi was responsible for his accident. In order to thoroughly investigate what Seonmi had done to him and the company, President Lee called Jae-ho to his home and asked him to return to the company to help him conduct a thorough investigation of Seonmi. In order to get his daughter back as soon as possible and to punish Seonmi, Jae-ho immediately agreed to the chairman's request. Just as Seonmi was rejoicing at becoming the president of the art museum, Jae-ho had already investigated everything Seonmi had done during this time at the headquarters. He immediately reported this information to the chairman. President Lee directly ordered Jae-ho to dispatch audit department personnel to conduct a thorough investigation of the Overseas Art Museum branch. Upon receiving the news that the Overseas Art Museum was to be investigated by the audit department, Seonmi panicked. She prepared to book a flight to arrive overseas before the audit department. Jae-ho then directly went to Seonmi's office. He bluntly stated that it was all in vain, as it was already too late. It turned out that Seonmi had used Junkyu's name to invest in the overseas subsidiary. However, all the money invested had been embezzled by Seonmi and put into her own pocket. Seonmi denied everything Jae-ho said, but this was no longer a matter of whether Seonmi admitted it or not. The facts were clear. President Lee first severely reprimanded Junkyu. He emphasized that when making any important decisions, one must gather information from multiple sources before making a decision. Then he asked Jae-ho to recover the money Seonmi had embezzled. In fact, he was telling Junkyu to fire Seonmi from her position at the art gallery. Junkyu took Seonmi to the art gallery in the middle of the night. He told Seonmi to pack her things and leave the company while no one was around. Only then did Seonmi realize that she had been fired. She told Junkyu that everything she did was to help him succeed in inheriting the entire group. But Junkyu saw right through Seonmi and no longer believed her lies. Junkyu knew that if he weren't the chairman's son, Seonmi wouldn't even look at him. Just like when they first met, with no other choice, Seonmi knelt in front of Junkyu and begged for mercy. At home, President Lee continued to pretend to have amnesia. He didn't harshly reprimand Seonmi for her mistakes, but merely told her lightly not to make the same mistakes again, no matter where she was. President Lee wanted to use this method to lower Seonmi's guard. After dinner, Junkyu rushed to the hospital, because today was the day Lucy was scheduled to undergo a bone marrow transplant. Seeing Lucy's fearful expression as she approached the operating room, Junkyu felt immense pain. Junkyu ran to the lobby alone, and tears once again flowed uncontrollably. However, his frequent visits to see Lucy had aroused Seonmi's suspicions. To clarify this situation, Seonmi secretly went to the hospital. At that moment, Junkyu asked Hayami and Jae-ho how to handle the children's issues. They were unaware that Seonmi was eavesdropping nearby. Junkyu could no longer tolerate living with Seonmi, this vicious woman. He finally understood why Seonmi had been so adamant about preventing him from undergoing the bone marrow match test for Lucy. It turned out that Seonmi wanted to watch Lucy die with her own eyes. Junkyu had no more attachments and immediately demanded a divorce. Seonmi then threatened him with her shares in the company. This made Junkyu hesitate and dare not act rashly. Now that she knew the truth, Seonmi had nothing to hide. In order to stay in the wealthy family with her biological daughter as planned, Seonmi admitted to Jae-ho that Perrin was his biological daughter. She hoped that Jae-ho would think about his daughter's future happiness and take Hayami and Lucy away from here to live somewhere else forever. Jae-ho remained unmoved and insisted on finding his daughter. Seonmi believed that with the company shares in her hands, Junkyu would not dare to act rashly. However, There was someone who did not have such concerns. Jae-ho's mother found out the truth about the switch between Lucy and Perrin, so she ran to Jungkyu's house alone to tell him everything. She couldn't bear to see such a vicious woman continue to do evil deeds. By the time Jungkyu and the others returned, it was already too late. Jae-ho's mother revealed everything she knew. Your own granddaughter was swapped by Seonmi and abandoned in the freezing cold. And the granddaughter you've been raising and doting on is actually my biological granddaughter. Jungkyu and the others remained silent, acknowledging everything. President Lee emerged from the room and overheard everything. The couple was utterly stunned and couldn't believe what they had heard. Sunja couldn't sit still any longer and wanted to personally kick Seonmi out of the house. President Lee hurriedly stopped her and urged her to be patient. He knew that Seonmi had been using those shares as a shield, but he had already instructed Jae-ho to handle the matter. Jae-ho had disguised himself and negotiated with the scammer to buy the shares in Seonmi's possession, because the shares in Seonmi's possession also belonged to the scammer. If Seonmi failed to meet the agreed double payment by the specified time, the scammer would reclaim the shares. Now the scammer had little time left to wait for Seonmi. In this desperate situation, Seonmi was determined to exchange the shares for a large sum of cash. Otherwise, if the swindler made a decision on his own, she might really be left with nothing. Seonmi didn't know that she was about to fall into the trap Jae-ho had set for her. Just as Seonmi was holding the shares and waiting for the buyer with the swindler, Jae-ho and Hyami, who had disguised their identities, walked in as buyers. Seonmi finally realized that she had been deceived. Then Jungkyu appeared as the person in charge of the company and deliberately caught them in the act of making the deal. Seonmi was terrified and fled in a hurry. The scammer, to protect himself, apologized and left immediately. The group finally managed to retrieve the company shares. Seonmi rushed back home, packed her belongings, and prepared to flee with her daughter. She refused to give up. As long as Jungkyu couldn't find her, he wouldn't be able to proceed with the divorce proceedings smoothly. As long as Perrin wasn't around, Lucy would never be able to return to Jungkyu. She would never let Jungkyu and the others get their daughters back. Seonmi decided to take her daughter abroad to start a new life. The three of them searched in vain and became anxious. Jungkyu wanted to call the police to help them find her. Police officer Jae-ho appeared and refused to do so, fearing that it would scare Perrin. Just as they were at a loss, Seonmi called them. She refused to give up and scolded them for pushing her to this point. She vowed to make sure they never see Perrin again. Lucy, whose identity had been exposed, was showered with love by both families. However, in Lucy's eyes, only her grandmother and father mattered. But the two of them had no blood relation to Lucy. Lucy's biological parents, out of concern for their daughter's young heart, feared she might be hurt. They could only helplessly act as her uncle and aunt and try to get their daughter to accept them little by little. But Sunja didn't care about anyone's feelings and wanted to claim Lucy back. Jae-ho's mother was the first to disagree with this. Lucy was raised by her with great difficulty. In her heart, Lucy was her own granddaughter. She was unwilling to hand Lucy over to Sunja. President Lee understood human nature better than his wife. Although Perrin was not his biological granddaughter, he had developed deep feelings for her over the years. However, he also desperately wanted to bring Lucy back home to raise her, but he knew that acting too hastily now would only hurt Lucy. So, after President Lee's persuasion, his wife reluctantly agreed to temporarily give up on bringing Lucy home. Lucy's body was recovering rapidly after the surgery. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jae-ho secretly gave Hyami a surprise. He got down on one knee and proposed to Hyami. This deeply moved Hyami. If Jae-ho hadn't been by her side all this time, she didn't know what would have happened. Hyami didn't hesitate and happily accepted Jae-ho's proposal. That day, Hyami brought Lucy to Jungkyu's house as a guest. The chairman and his wife missed their granddaughter dearly. At the dinner table, everyone showered Lucy with love and attention. For Lucy, who had suffered so much since childhood, it was finally a sweet moment after a long period of hardship. However, Seonmi, who had received the news, was terrified. She was afraid that Lucy would return to the wealthy family and take her daughter's place. She couldn't hide anymore. In a panic, she took Perrin and ran back. Seonmi's appearance finally put everyone's minds at ease. But no matter how shamelessly Seonmi tried to fabricate lies to stay as the wealthy family's daughter-in-law, President Lee made it clear that it was absolutely impossible. Having fully regained his memories, he had long since come to hate Seonmi with a vengeance. If Seonmi refused to divorce, he would use legal means to sue her for the heinous crimes she had committed. However, suing Seonmi would also cause significant harm to them. After all, this was a matter of honor for the entire Chaebol family. In the end, President Lee still hoped to resolve the matter peacefully with Seonmi. Seonmi's demand was to transfer the entire art museum into her name. Sunja was so angry that she wanted to teach her a lesson on the spot. Jungkyu and Seonmi's divorce matter thus reached a deadlock. Meanwhile, both sides have already started making plans regarding custody of the two children. Jungkyu and Jaeho both want to raise both children together. Jungkyu suggested reconciling with Hyami and bringing Lucy back to live with them. Hyami was furious and immediately rejected Jungkyu's selfish idea. Jaeho is also desperately trying to obtain custody of Perrin from Seonmi. However, he was scolded by Seonmi. After careful consideration, Seonmi ultimately agreed to divorce Jungkyu to prevent her daughter from returning to Jaeho and living a life of poverty. She wanted her daughter to remain in the wealthy family and live a life of privilege. The only condition was that Jungkyu must never hand Perrin over to Jaeho. Additionally, she insisted on ensuring Perrin's position within the household. In the end, Seonmi cries bitterly as Jungkyu takes his daughter away. It must be said that Seonmi is indeed a good mother to her biological daughter. Jaeho is helpless upon hearing this news. Although he is Perrin's biological father, he has no legal or emotional right to take his daughter back. Seonmi suddenly falls ill and is rushed to the hospital for treatment. Upon hearing the news, all three rushed to the hospital. The three were shocked to learn that Seonmi was pregnant with Jungkyu's child. She was overjoyed and felt like she had regained her happiness. However, President Lee did not change his decision towards Seonmi just because she was pregnant. Sunja was also unwilling to live with such a heartless woman. At this point, she was determined to use Perrin to get her granddaughter Lucy back as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Jungkyu had his own plans. He wanted to raise both children himself. Jungkyu's father supported his decision. After all, he had grown very fond of Perrin over the years. Jungkyu's goal was to use Lucy to get Hyami to remarry him and start over. As for Seonmi, he was determined to divorce her. He planned to take the child in her womb back after it was born and raise it together. Hyami and Jaeho also began preparing to secure custody of the two children. The two had already decided to set a wedding date and start looking for a larger house. After spending time with Hyami, Lucy had developed a dependency on her, though she still didn't know that Hyami was her biological mother. But she already thinks of Hyami as her mother. At this moment, Hyami hears Lucy call her mom for the first time. The sudden sound of her mother's voice makes Hyami cry with joy. Jaeho is also very happy that Lucy has accepted Hyami so quickly. Seonmi never thought that having a child would not help her achieve her goal. Jungkyu clearly tells Seonmi that it is impossible to start over with the child in her womb. If she didn't agree, he would use the law to protect his interests. Seonmi knew that Jungkyu was in a hurry to divorce her because he wanted to get back together with Hyami. Before going to see the chairman, Seonmi ran to Hyami's place to provoke her. She was afraid that Jungkyu's desire to get back together with Hyami would prevent her from returning to the wealthy family. Seonmi told Hyami that if she didn't want her daughter to be taken away from her, it would be best to take her daughter and hide away. Otherwise, when she loses her daughter again, she shouldn't feel regret. Hearing these words, Hyami was panicked. Seonmi came to the mansion and told her father-in-law that she was willing to divorce him. But she had one condition. That was that she had to stay in the house and give birth to the child. Seonmi's father-in-law and the others saw through her ploy to delay things. No matter what Seonmi said, her father-in-law would never agree. When the time came, they would arrange a house for Seonmi to live in and take care of the baby. Seonmi said directly that if they insisted on kicking her out, then she would take the baby in her womb and disappear for 20 years. Considering the baby in Seonmi's womb, the chairman and his wife could only allow her to stay at home for the time being. But Sunja couldn't stand seeing the evil Seonmi floating around in front of her eyes. She had already lost all her feelings for Perrin. Now, the only way to smoothly get rid of Seonmi and bring their granddaughter back is to have Hyami and Jungkyu remarry and cut off Seonmi's hopes. Sunja urged her son to hold on to Hyami tightly and not let go. She told Jungkyu to trust her to handle everything. Sunja immediately found Hyami and had a talk with her. She blamed Hyami for the fact that the two children couldn't return to their respective parents. Remarrying Jungkyu is the best option. Perrin can return to Jaeho's side. Lucy can also return to her real family and grow up happily. However, this fact puts Hyami in a difficult position. She doesn't want to lose Jaeho, and she doesn't want to lose her own daughter. She wants to live with her daughter and Jaeho, but if she does that, Jaeho will never take back his biological daughter. President Lee strongly supported his son's remarriage to Hyami and raising the children together. If Hyami did not agree to remarry, then they would use legal means to get custody of Lucy back. Hyami was unmoved and said that she would use the same method to protect her rights. Seonmi tried everything she could to get Jaeho and Hyami to marry. At this critical moment, Jaeho proposed breaking up with Hyami. He knows that Hyami cannot lose Lucy if he insists on marrying Hyami. Hayami will most likely lose her daughter again. Just like before, for Hayami's sake and to get his daughter back, he has no choice but to break up with Hayami. Just like that, their sincere relationship comes to an end due to various reasons. This breaks Hayami's heart and she is left in tears. The news of Hayami and Jaeho's breakup plunges Seonmi into a state of panic. Seonmi immediately finds Jaeho and begs him not to break up with Hayami. She absolutely does not want to see Junkyu take Hayami and Lucy back home and take her place with her daughter. Jaeho does not want to continue entangling himself with this madwoman. Seonmi's mother, who has been in a vegetative state in a nursing home, finally passes away. This made her hate Hayami's family even more. Her mother had become a vegetable 20 years ago because of Hayami's mother. Now, her own happiness was once again threatened by Hayami. Under such blows and pressure, her nerves and emotions were on the verge of collapse. In the car, she saw another evil side of herself. Seonmi blamed Hayami for all the misery she was facing. Then, 2 ambulances arrived at the hospital at the same time. Seonmi and Hayami were both injured to varying degrees and rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. Seonmi was pregnant and lost her child in the accident. During the operation, she thought back to what she had done. A tear of heartbreak fell from the corner of her eye. Perhaps this was God's cruel punishment for her. Fortunately, Hayami was only slightly injured and suffered some minor abrasions. After a night's rest, she would be able to return to normal the next day. However, after treatment, Seonmi not only lost her unborn child, but her symptoms of mental illness also became more severe. She would talk to herself, muttering incomprehensible words to the air in front of her. Finally, after diagnosis, the doctor told Junkyu that Seonmi had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. This accident was very likely caused by Seonmi's hallucinations. In order to prevent such an accident from happening again and causing an irreparable situation, and also so that Hayami would not lose Lucy, Jaeho knew that the only way to make things easier for Hayami was to leave. When Hayami found out that Jaeho was leaving, she rushed to the airport to try to stop him. In Hayami's heart, both the child and Jaeho had become an indispensable part of her life. She could understand how painful it was for Jaeho to leave her, but fate played a cruel trick on them, and although they were close to each other, they passed each other by. Hayami cried loudly outside the airport. She knew that she couldn't live without Jaeho. She didn't want Jaeho to be like a stranger who had passed by her. She wanted him to be the person who would accompany her through life. At the same time, Seonmi, who had been mentally unstable, came back to life. She dragged her injured body straight to the wealthy family's house. In order to get her biological daughter back, she went crazy and made a big scene in the house. Perrin was scared and trembling, feeling extremely afraid of Seonmi. Junkyu knew very well that it would not be easy to completely sever all ties with Seonmi. He told his father that the only way was to give Perrin to Hayami to raise. Only Hayami could protect Perrin well now. But Junkyu also made his own decision about Lucy's custody. Over the years, he knew that he had caused Hayami too much pain. He wanted to be a good father and didn't want to hurt his 2 children anymore. In the end, Junkyu decided to give both children to Hayami to raise. This was perhaps the best way for Junkyu to make up for the mistakes he had made towards Hayami. President Lee could also understand his son's feelings of guilt towards Hayami. Junkyu's decision ultimately meant that he was drawing a line between himself and Seonmi. He warned Seonmi that if she dared to break into his house again, he would not hesitate to take action. Seonmi, in the end, accepted the punishment for her sins and lost everything. Hayami decided to take the children to find Jaeho so they could have a complete family. Time passed quickly, and a year went by. Hayami had no regrets and successfully reunited with Jaeho. Returning to the country, Jaeho did not selfishly enjoy the family life with the 2 children alone. He told Junkyu that he wasn't the only father of the 2 children, that Junkyu was also their father. This made Junkyu very happy. Hayami found Seonmi, whom she hadn't seen in a year. At this point, Seonmi no longer had her former sharpness and looked pitiful. She had lost everything and, due to mental illness, had forgotten everything. Hayami handed Seonmi the envelope containing Perrin's photos. She never imagined that her best friend, who she grew up with, would become a stranger. Did Seonmi really forget everything? Obviously not. She remembered her daughter. She was a bad woman, but she was a good mother. However, she ended up receiving the cruelest punishment for her mistakes. With terminal cancer, she would eventually leave this world alone and be gradually forgotten by everyone. Children are the apple of every parent's eye, and they want to give them the best. In the eyes of children, having their parents by their side is perhaps the best gift they can receive. Although the whole process was cruel for Hayami, who was unable to find her child, her spirit of never giving up and never abandoning her child ultimately allowed her to find happiness. She vowed that no matter what happened in this life, she would do everything in her power to protect them and let them grow up happily.